Good evening. Welcome to the Mendon Conservation Commission. Today is January 23rd, 2025. It is 7 p.m. I'm calling the meeting to order. Our first order of business is for the commissioners to introduce ourselves. My name is Carl Hummel. I'm the chair.
Bob Sweet.
Leah Whiting.
Tim Icardi.
Mike Amandoli.
Online, we have
Suka Halen, Vice Chair.
and Peter may show up, and he's busy commuting back and forth today. This meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on, a link to it will be posted on our website and made available on YouTube. Since we have a member online, our votes will be taken via roll call. Next order of business is good and welfare for the public. This is an opportunity for concerned citizens to bring to the attention of the Conservation Commission matters that they wish us to look into further or to express their opinions. If they're here, I would ask that this not be related to anything which is already on the agenda. For example, if you're interested in 23 Cape Road, I will give an opportunity to the public to comment on that when we are in that part of the agenda. We would not be making decisions or deliberating on anything other than to decide whether we wanted to refer the matter to the conservation agent to investigate and perhaps put on a future agenda. So is there anyone who online or in person who is interested in this part of the agenda? Okay. We'll now move to the public hearing part of the meeting. I'll deal with agenda items 4 and 5 quickly since they are going to be continuances. Item 4, 27 Pleasant Street, DEP 218-0862. Construction of a single-family house within a 100-foot buffer zone. Do I have a motion to continue?
Yes. I make a motion to continue the public hearing for 27 Pleasant Street, DEP number 218-0860 until the next public hearing on February 13th.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Bob, aye.
Chair, aye.
Leah, aye.
Tim, aye.
Mike, aye.
Sue, I.
Passes unanimously. Agenda item 5, notice of intent for 29 Pleasant Street, DEP number 218-0861. Construction of another single-family house within the 100-foot buffer zone. Do I have a motion to continue?
Make a motion to continue public hearing for 29 Pleasant Street, DEP number 218-0861 until the next public hearing on February 13th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. I'm glad that my training people to read what Isabel is writing for us is paying off. Any further discussion?
Don't tell people that. Let them think we're smart.
No, I want everyone to know she's smart. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Bob, aye.
Chair,
Sue,
aye.
I.
Leah, aye.
Wait your turn.
It's hard to hear.
Mike, aye.
Passes unanimously. All right. Before we decide what the next order of business is, as a courtesy to applicants who are paying staff to appear here, I'd like to go through the agenda items and take a head count of not people who are here representing themselves, but professionals who are being paid to come and represent and work on behalf of the applicant. And then whichever one has the most people here, we'll let them go first and then work our way down. So for agenda item 6, 75 Blackstone Street, how many professionals are here? We have 1, okay. For for agenda item 7, request for determination of applicability 133 North Avenue. How many staff? We have 2. And is there anyone online? Okay. And for 23 Cape Road, I believe I recognize Connor. Is there anyone in the audience? Okay, so that's 2 as well. Okay, well, you're not a public hearing, so unfortunately, you'll end up going last, but we will do the 133 North Avenue first and then go backwards and do 75 Blackstone. So come on up. We had a site walk earlier today and made observations. This is our opportunity to deliberate on what we had and share what we saw with members of the committee who were not able, of the commission who were not able to attend. So I think we can start with you making your presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Appreciation to those of you that read the code this afternoon with us. My name's Jeff Porter, environmental lawyer at Holland and Knight in Boston. With me is Tom Schultz of Goddard. Mr. Goddard had day surgery earlier today. He thought he would rally, but he didn't. So he will not be joining us. And to Rick Fayad from the representing of the applicant. I don't know how much detail you want us to get into. I feel like the request and the response to comments are pretty thorough, but generally speaking, there are various activities that have been undertaken in connection with the use of the property. We do have answers to some of the questions that were asked today, so I don't know if you want us to just restate the question and volunteer the answer or wait until we're asked, but we do have answers to questions that were asked during the site visit today.
Okay.
These are all activities that are normal maintenance activities as specified in the regulations related to an agricultural use. The impacts, the positive impacts of many of the activities is significant. As the Goddard report indicates, there are no appreciable negative impacts to any resource. So given the amount that we've written in this, Tom, in this, if there's anything to add, I think we'll just welcome your questions.
Okay. Peter is now here, probably dashing from Worcester and eating his dinner. Yep. So Peter Coffin is also on the commission. The goal is that at the end of this part of the conversation, the commission will have worked with you on coming to one of three possible outcomes. One of them is we will make a negative determination as you have requested, which would mean that we agree with all of the stipulations and arguments and the narrative that you have put both in your initial RDA and in the responses that you gave to our questions. The other response that may happen is that the commission decides that they wish to issue a positive determination for whatever reason, and those would be written up by our conservation agent and forwarded to you with the expectation that you would come back with an NOI or some other process of working through the WPA paperwork. And the third alternative is, as we're having the conversation, we agree that there's more information that we want to gather over the next 3 weeks because we need the second and fourth meeting. My understanding is that you will be out of the country, and if it turns out that your participation as counsel for the applicant is crucial, we may decide to defer that until the second meeting in February, which would be the fourth week. So with that as a background, yep.
They just, we're speaking after the site visit, and I
Yes.
wanted to offer a variant of
Oh.
the first possibility,
Okay.
which is a negative determination of applicability.
Yeah.
If there are conditions that the commission would like to see to buttress its view that a negative determination is appropriate, we would like to explore that as well.
Yeah, I remember from my MACC training, we can do an RDA with conditions as part of the RDA. And I'd ask Isabella to give us the details on that particular thing, or someone else who's taken more recent training than me. Okay, so Yep, go ahead.
So if it was to the board's, liking to do a negative determination. You're saying to put conditions to corrective measures, is that because everything is completed? Okay, I'm assuming that's what you mean.
That would be included among the possibilities. We don't, probably not surprising, we think that a negative determination is appropriate without any conditions, but if there were members of the commission that felt differently, we would certainly want to explore that, with the end result being a negative determination as opposed to something else that might be more likely to result in review by others.
Okay. What I'll start with is, we know that we will be going through the 15 or so questions that Isabella prepared and then you responded to earlier this week. Are there things that commissioners would like to bring up that aren't already included in that particular packet? Are there things that you want to, otherwise we'll just work our way through that document. Okay. So let's see, one of these is Stoddard responses. Okay. So the first question, the background for here is that after our last meeting, Isabella sent you an email with a bunch of her observations and data, and then as a response, Goddard Consulting created a response to conservation agents' comments on a request for RDA. So going through, the first request was to update the plan to include 100-foot buffer zone to border and vegetative wetland and 100-foot river-foot area to Muddy Brook. And that has been done. That's been shared with the commission. I see Bob has the spreadsheet. So when we went on the site walk, we looked at the important parts of the site, which would be the the rows going down, the improved drainage ditch on the southern border of the property, and the pump house, and the Muddy Brook area where work had been done. And oh, I forgot to mention that for this particular agenda item, Susan Cahalan will be recusing herself as she is in the butter. So she will, if she has I distinguish between asking commissioners for their input and feedback, and then after all commissioners have completed it, then it's open to members of the audience and citizens. It is at that time that Susan would be able, but she would be asking questions and responding as a citizen rather than as a commissioner. Okay. All right. So any questions about the first response to the question, or what the map is, or how we saw things at the site walk? Okay. Going on to number 2. Question was about, is there a stormwater management report for the parking lot? On the plan that we have, and it's also on this one, there appear to be 9 catch basins and 2 manholes. And are they all discharging into the single drainage ditch, which is a pipe that we saw going out this afternoon? Or are some of the 9 going out to North Avenue and municipal system? We talked about that at the site walk, so I'll let you give a response verbally.
So I reached out to a prior employee who was part of that, and the catch basins all go to a manhole in the grass area, which then goes to the outlet to the swale underneath that retaining wall.
Okay. Were they able to say whether there were any engineering plans that detailing any constructions of sumps or filtration or any other stormwater management?
The sumps were 4 feet.
Okay.
In all the catch basins. So you had 4 feet of sump, but I can further reach out for more information if desired.
Okay, later on, we can have a conversation with the people who are familiar with that kind of engineering as to whether that information is sufficiently important to warrant a continuance.
Just a question, so is that a solid bottom?
So it's a solid
With a
bottom.
4 foot of sump?
Correct, 4 feet. So the bottom of the outlet to the bottom of the basin.
Just cut left under.
That's correct. So all the sump will stay and eventually will be cleaned out.
We have found the building permit for the particular work on the retaining wall and the driveway. It was forwarded to the applicants, although maybe not in time for you to take a close look at it, but there do not appear to be any stormwater plan documentation or flow, all of those spreadsheets that people do when they're doing stormwater calculations.
So are we saying that all the water that's coming from the parking lot is going down into the swale that's going towards the wetlands?
Yes, I believe you said none of it's going to the municipal drains on
That's
North
correct.
Avenue.
And I know you guys talked about, the discharging and everything, that part of it, but, is the water treated? Is there something there that filters out, contaminants?
I think that's the answer to the next question.
Yes, and this is another thing we brought up at the sidewalk. Question 3, is there water quality treatment and stormwater management? I wanted to distinguish between water quality treatment, which, as you were asking, would be salt, oil, rubber, all of the other stuff that accumulates in a parking lot, sand and whatnot. What you are describing in section 6 of the RNDA is physical treatment of the stormwater, which is, my summary of that is, once the stormwater gets into the improved drainage ditch, you have a whole lot of riprap, you have check dams, and they are to physically control the outflow and slow the velocity. But it does not appear as if there's any particular water quality to deal with contaminants from the driveway. Is that a fair statement?
Probably a good thing to control if you have an agricultural, operation going on, wouldn't you think? You don't want that getting into your crops and contaminating things.
Okay. Going on to the next question. Does the riprap swale serve as a stormwater BMP, best management practice? Is that what BMP means?
Yes.
Okay. And the response was, as is discussed in section 6, the riprap is there to protect the downgradient resource areas. Question 5, what was the purpose of the parking lot improvements? And the answer is that prior to the work done on the parking lot, it was a compacted gravel lot with no stormwater management. It discharged into the field and ultimately into Muddy Brook. As discussed in section 6, the improvements that were done, the retaining wall, paving it, stabilized the area and reduces erosion. One of the other observations that was made in the RDA, and we talked about on site, is in 2016, there were 2 channels going down from the road and the house and the unpaved parking lot. One of them was the unimproved drainage ditch on the side, on the south side. And we have aerial photography showing a meandering channel going down, identified as a drainage from the parking lot. So one of the actions that was taking place during the improvement was to basically take the stuff flowing in the middle and slam it down into the improved drainage ditch. And so the narrative that Goddard is saying is that that protects down gradient resources area from sedimentation and then promotes infiltration, as opposed to meandering all over the blueberry bushes. Any questions or observations on this?
Yes,
Okay, I'm gonna,
go ahead, Tim.
I saw Tim raising his,
So, are you referring to the 2011, 2012 period?
I took a note on this.
That's attached for this.
In the RDA.
Area, in this area?
Yes, no. It's from 2016.
This one.
Yes, 2014, figure 6 on page 6 of the document, the bottom photograph. Figure 6, an aerial from September 2014 displaying the historic drainage of runoff from the parking lot area. And it shows the green unimproved drainage ditch at the southern border and then the meandering black line with the caption midfield ditch serves runoff from parking lot.
What's the date?
It's page 6, figure 6,
What date?
September 2014.
So I'm looking at, this is in, and no,
2011.
2011, 2012. It kind of resembles what's up there now. The drainage area looks like it goes down on the, where that fence, where the white fence is, it kind of follows that red line. It almost looks like, is that accurate?
Yes, that's
Yes.
where the property line is.
It kind of looks, it kind of resembles where the outflow is now.
I think isn't surprising if you don't have any improvement to drainage. If you begin with the 2008 photo and come all the way forward, prior to the improvement, the drainage is in a slightly different place every year, depending on where gravity and water. So I mean, in 2008, it's closer to the location of the current improved ditch. 2011, 2010, there are other photos where it's more in the middle of the field. And again, there's not any effort being made to control where the stormwater goes and how. That's what you would expect to see.
Okay.
I would also just add one more clarification, because there's been a focus on runoff from the parking lot. As those of you who were present today saw, the parking lot is at the top of the hill. So that it is true that that ditch is receiving runoff from the parking lot, but it's also receiving runoff from all other locations between the top of the hill and the bottom of the hill.
So Leah was first and then,
Oh, I just wanted to know that if you would use, you used to pave the parking lot, is it permeable, is it impermeable?
Because
No, it's impermeable, regular
that-
pavement.
okay, Peter?
I just can't let that statement stand. That, yes, there is now quite a bit of mound filled in and a wall, which I stood on for the first time today, which was 16 feet tall. And so I'm wondering what historically was, that was a barnyard where the cows were, and the cows would go down to the water, and at some point, technology that might pump water, but a ditch, a drainage ditch, does not move. If it's not tended, it tends to stay where it was. It might deepen. Given time, it might wend its way around, but not year to year. And to see, so that's all I'll say.
with respect, I would just refer to the pictures that are in the record from 2011. Folks can look at them for themselves and make their own determination.
But at some point, some map notes two ditches.
Swirls around too.
But somebody, a surveyor or somebody who drew a plan, noted two ditches,
No,
a midfield ditch
no,
or.
no. Well, this is when Goddard was preparing the NRDA, they put a caption in saying, the second one is, if you take a
So
look,
midfield implies it's not on the edge of.
well, take a look at right here. They have the green one, which was the unimproved drainage ditch, and then they drove a little swirly black line identifying a midfield one, runoff from the parking lot area. And that is what has now been improved. That had been slammed together, all stormwater from the parking lot areas now going into an improved drainage ditch.
Right. So, excuse me if I'm also hung up on words. What's the difference between intermittent stream and a ditch? Besides, one got improved by a farmer somewhere along the way, and straightened out, or
Anyone else want to respond to that? Okay. Any further discussion on the purpose of the parking lot question? Parking lot improvement question.
The parking lot. This is a tough question, because we don't know where existing wetlands were, where they began, where they didn't begin. The parking lot in any way in a buffer zone.
We'll bring up, we will have a discussion about the southern border, the ditch, the improved drainage ditch, whether that is jurisdictional for the Concom. I'd like to go through the rest of the questions, and then that is one of the issues we will be raising.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yep.
Was Goddard Consultant put on site after all the improvements or during them or before them?
When were you engaged?
We flagged the site after the improvements were made.
Okay,
So there would be no way of knowing where any wetland plants were prior to moving or improving the area.
Correct, yes, I would not be able to know what kind of vegetation was there prior to the construction being completed.
okay. Any further questions about parking lot at this part of the parking lot conversation? All right, question 6. The stone block retaining wall falls within a 30-foot buffer zone to the offsite BBD series and then GCA 1A1-A13 on the western edge of the property, which would be within the 50-foot no-build buffer zone under the Maine bylaws. This is now we're having the conversation about whether the southern border of the property, which started out in the narrative as a drainage ditch and then was turned into an improved drainage ditch when the retaining wall and parking lot was paved. So we'll now have a discussion about why or why not that might be jurisdictional. I'd make an opening statement on that.
I don't have anything to add to Goddard's conclusion that that the retaining wall area alone was not jurisdictional under the state act. The outside portion of the retaining wall area is jurisdictional under the Mendon bylaw.
Okay.
As a buffer. And then what I know the commission has already read about the pre-retaining wall condition and the post-retaining wall condition with respect to potential impacts on the BPW.
Right. Well, let me redirect a bit and be more specific about what I'm asking in this one. The question is, it looks by looking at the topo and the overlays that we have from the state, it appears that the drainage ditch, improved or not improved, was considered at one point in time a wetlands because it's got the little hash marks on the map. So the question is not, have you had a positive impact by doing the retaining wall? The question is, what is your position on whether that was a wetlands? It sounds like you're saying it was not a wetlands.
That's the answer to GC 11.
Okay, so
If we
yeah, we
Well,
can,
I'll add, sorry,
Yep.
rather than look at what was or wasn't wetlands. Currently, as it stands, it's within our 50-foot no build. There's a structure within the 50-foot no build, so that does not comply
okay.
with the wetlands.
And the structure is the retaining wall or the stuff down at the bottom?
The retaining wall and the paved asphalt and the discharge point
Okay,
for those.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's an agreement that as to the retaining wall, yes. We're not, I don't think, prepared to concede tonight that any amount of the pavement is within that
okay.
buffer.
We could go out with the tape measure
Right,
with the
exactly.
calipers on the plan or the as-built. Okay, so we will continue working our way through and seeing if there is enough lack of clarity that we want to gather for more information over the next 3 or 5 weeks. So I will flag as an open item. We have not yet come to an agreement as to whether that part of the drainage ditch should be considered jurisdictional or not. Okay, going to question 7. How does the drainage ditch service the field in agricultural production? And the response is that it protects the agriculture field, the blueberry rows now, from the historically unmanaged stormwater channeling seen in the graphic. So they're showing a graphic from 2011, 2012. This is in addition to the other ones that were shown in the RDA submission. So the improved drainage ditch currently also captures runoff from the blueberry field, protecting the ground gradient resource areas. I specifically asked people on the sidewalk to look very carefully at the topography as we were walking down the hill. So I would like to get people who are on the sidewalk to say whether, from their observations, the blueberry fields would be channeling all their water down into the improved drainage ditch, or whether it would be going someplace else.
Someplace else,
Okay, where do you think that it would be going?
downhill
So,
towards the stream.
okay, so you don't think there was enough of a slope leaning towards the drainage ditch to make all of the water after a rain event to, they would keep going
No,
down?
it's, the slope is such, and it's such a long slope, but that water is gonna be heading the other way. Well, some of on the side funnel into
Yeah.
that, maybe a little bit. But, to me, it looks like it's all flowing downhill towards the stream.
Okay, I'll ask other people who are on the sidewalk.
So sure.
Tim?
The way the roads are, the elevations of all the roads and the topography's tipping toward the swale that they, the drainage swale. So I can't see, other than the driveway on the far left side,
Mhm.
everything in the field, in my estimation, standing at the top, definitely tips toward the swale.
So,
And then the rows, the blueberry rows, they've got to be 3 feet high.
yeah, so the path we walked down, those would be sluicing straight down to the brook, but the actual,
Exactly. I think the majority of the field tips toward the swale.
okay, Bob,
It's kind of obvious.
I agree that it tips towards the swale, yes.
okay, Isabella, do you want to comment?
Well, I guess the argument is that it's protected from stormwater discharge from the parking lot. Could it have been directed a different way or detained in the area of the parking lot rather than need the field be protected from the swale?
Okay, my observation after I waved my hands and called everyone's attention to it is that by looking at the plan and looking at the overhead photos, it doesn't look like the blueberry rows are going to go down to the ditch, but looking out at the field from the parking lot, the retaining wall looking down, it does appear to me like the majority of the stormwater would in fact be going into the now improved drainage ditch.
But the whole thing goes down.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, once it's going into the drainage ditch, then it would continue to go downhill.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I could ask a question?
Yep.
Does stormwater management and the management of the water that's coming through the blueberry field have the same criteria? Is it all considered agricultural? Is stormwater one set, which would be the parking lot and water runoff from the parking lot? And then the field with the blueberries in it, a secondary means of water and ability to remove that water?
Well, you're not going to remove the water. You want to manage its output into the.
What I mean is redirected.
The whole purpose of the improvement in the riprap that's now currently in the improved one is to slow the velocity. Again, we were talking about, there does not appear to be any treatment. For example, if the blueberries got a heavy dose of fertilizer, that runoff would just work into the drainage ditch and then into it. So is that enough of an answer? The stormwater is stormwater, whether it's coming from a field or the parking lot. We are concerned about, once the stormwater works its way into the wetlands, has it been appropriately conditioned so as to not impact the resource area and fail to meet performance standards?
Okay, that answers the question then, Mike, because the question was, is there a difference in different sets of water, but they're all considered the same?
I don't think an agricultural exemption applies to stormwater. Is that something anyone can clarify?
Well, I would say the request for determination is for the agricultural exemption and that the work is related to such agricultural exemption, whether the parking lot improvements and stormwater improvements are subject to an agricultural exemption and therefore exempt is what the commission's being asked.
Okay.
Can I ask a?
I'll let
Go
Bob go.
I just don't. Stormwater is stormwater, yeah, there's not the difference, I mean, there's different loadings that different land uses will provide. Don't go there. I would think our concern would be more like the rate and the volume of runoff, and typically in a blueberry, you wouldn't worry about the runoff. It's gonna all get absorbed. The only time maybe when it's frozen grounds and then it's gonna go. but it's relatively flat. But you're looking at the whole site. So now you've changed, looking for an agricultural use because you paved and raised the barnyard and paved it all. And you've got I guess the roof running off. So that is my concern, the volume from that impervious paved surface. For what agricultural use? I don't see why that should be allowed. With such a big wall, now you're disturbing all sorts of habitat. And then once sorry, I didn't go on the walk, but as you started that walk, going down that hill, all that water coming off that, whatever, I don't know how the drainage is and where they're all, but any surface going down, follow the way you walk. And once that water gets going, it's not going to curve back. So the vast majority of the site might go to the ditch, but you don't worry about that because that should be agriculture and you're not, you're probably going to grow organic blueberries.
They're not organic.
Whatever, that's not my concern, is the impact from the agricultural use. My concern more is from the commercial use that's above it and where this drainage starts and there's no management of the catch basins. And you can, I guess you can put catch basins on a private house and fill 12 feet with what sort of permit? I'll leave it at that.
Just to
Isabella,
elaborate,
is Leah first and then,
No,
a couple of things.
hold on, let's let Leah talk first.
I've grown a few blueberries in my life. And never would I want any of my crops to have contact of stormwater runoff. So that, I don't know what your agricultural plan is there. That's not a good way to grow things. You don't know what is going into your fields. I don't want to buy blueberries. Secondly, when were the blueberries planted again?
This summer, 24.
Okay, so we started this process, we spoke with you, I think, the first time we mentioned this was April. Okay. There were no blueberries there in April.
Those vegetables before. blueberries.
Yeah, it was June. It was probably June, July.
We'll get into a narrative of what the agricultural use of this farm has been for the past decade, 15 years later on in the conversation.
Well, I guess my main point is that if you have a farm plan, you don't want to be watering more plants with runoff from the street.
Okay,
If you're doing something agricultural.
to cut off perhaps what Goddard and the other people might want to say, the whole purpose of the improved drainage ditch and the catch basins in the parking lot is to keep parking lot stormwater out of the fields. Historically, they used to go in the fields. And the whole point of the improving the drainage ditch was to ensure that no stormwater runoff from the parking lot would ever get down there.
But it's never goes.
Isn't what
Where's all the stormwater from the paved parking lot?
It's going-
Down the swell.
Okay.
it's being captured in the catch basins. It's going underground and it's coming sploofed. We saw the big pipe at the top end of the improved drainage ditch. So all of the parking lot stormwater is going to go down that improved drainage ditch. Now, there are issues that we have open of that is untreated and there might be salt and oil contaminants, but that would be restricted to the drainage ditch and would not be able to go uphill to the actual blueberry plants.
Water does its thing, right? I wouldn't want.
Okay, well,
that
it's a
to be
question.
Away from anything.
It's a question of how much this gets into. There has the building permit that created the parking lot and the retaining wall did not have stormwater calculations. Those might possibly be able to reassure blueberry buyers that there wasn't enough going out of there. Okay, yep.
And just a few things. Again, just to point to everybody has an opinion, but Goddard did answer in its opinion the flow and velocity issues that Mr. Coffin has raised in the materials. So I would refer to the record for that analysis on flow and velocity. The agricultural exemption that people are focused on applies to areas subject to the act that are in agricultural use. It is Goddard's opinion, and I haven't seen anything else in the record, that the entire parking lot area that folks are focused on is outside Wetland Protection Act jurisdiction. So there, as we are here to, we will get no argument about whether possible determination should have been sought before the work was completed. We can't turn back the clock and do that, but I will tell you that if we were requesting a determination before the work, it wouldn't cover the parking lot because the parking lot is outside the jurisdiction of both the act and the Mendon bylaw. So, which we still want to address the commission's concerns about the runoff from that parking lot, but it is outside jurisdiction.
Okay. And-
Sorry. The blue series flag is along that fence. And it is highlighted on the first page of the response to the comments with the 100-foot buffer zone to BDWs. There is another wetland. So the field's coming down, there is a wetland flagged here by Goddard, which would cast the 100-foot. So I don't, my opinion is that this area is all subject to the act. But I agree that Goddard is not claiming it's an agricultural exemption.
Can you get the area that you think is subject, not the bylaw, the area that you think is subject to act? I just didn't.
Well,
see
if
it
this,
the way-
as the wetland is flagged, it's flagged along the property line. I don't know of any wetland that follows 100% straight line. So I think the commission should be looking at whether this area is subject to the act. It is definitely subject to the bylaw as a bordering vegetated wetland casts a 25 and 50 foot.
We agree about that.
And if vegetation is disturbed, that is also subject to the act within the buffer zone to a BBW.
Between the act, buffer zone. I mean, the bylaw buffers.
No, under the Wetland Protection Act, the vegetation is protected in 100 feet. So disturbance of vegetation in a buffer zone is also a violation of the Wetland Protection Act.
Okay, I guess this might be something that needs to be further discussed. Goddard has identified the areas in the submission. It seems as if there might be a disagreement between the agent and Goddard on that. We have to appreciate the specific
Well,
difference to be able to.
I'll look again, looking just at this slide here. There is a caption in yellow says 100-foot BV buffer zone to BVW. And there are two places where that color is yellow. One of them is down at the bottom of the hill, and the other one is this curve up in here. So are you now saying that that yellow area up at the top encompassing the parking lot in the southern half of the first 12 or so rows is an error?
No, I see this.
Okay. So is this something that you wish to discuss further and that becomes one of the issues that we gather more information on?
May have to be an issue that we.
Okay.
Information.
Okay, well, let's continue going through the questions because we may identify some other things
I
to.
guess the one other thing that
Yep.
I say though, again, is to refer to photographs.
Yep.
Is interactions between stormwater and this site didn't begin in 2020.
Mhm.
And the photos that go from 2011 forward, in the applicant's view, clearly show stormwater running. It don't show the, if it's an agricultural field, you wouldn't have scour erosion. Don't support that view. They clearly show scour and erosion from the upland to the downland, albeit uncontrolled because there was no channelization.
Yep. My final response is, you were saying earlier that stormwater is not jurisdictional of the Conservation Commission. People in the audience who are here for 23 Cape Road will have heard this particular statement before that. Stormwater that flows into the wetlands is jurisdictional, especially if it's going to be not treated, if it's going to be coming in too quickly and would disturb the wetlands in the BVW. So one of the reasons for why we want to focus on stormwater in the parking lot is because of the harsh lessons we've learned with 23 Cape Road, with all of its stormwater going into the brook on the eastern side of their parcel. So we're sensitive to what's in the parking lot. Is it getting treated? Is it coming too fast? Leah is saying, is it going to contaminate the soil and the blueberries? But we're more concerned about, is it going to be flowing too quickly through the vegetated zone? And so even though it may be outside of a 100-foot area, it's coming too quickly into the 100-foot area.
There's no difference.
Okay,
We would just, but I don't think we have anything to add tonight. to
okay,
What we said in section 6 of the.
Of the submission.
And then the follow-up specific question.
Okay.
My part.
yep.
How much activity is that?
The question is not what activity it has now. My understanding is that this will be a pick your own blueberry place in the summer, so there would be a lot of traffic. In addition, Kevin Meehan regularly opens up the barn for most of December for people to go through his Santa Wonderland, at which point if there was a snowstorm, the driveway would the parking lot would be plowed and sanded, and salted in order for people to not slide as they're working their way into the facility. I don't know if that's in a document or not.
It's a half acre. If you measure it, it's a half acre. Yeah.
There's none painted, so.
20 more.
Yeah, that's right.
There was, I'm sorry,
Yes.
And in addition, when pavement was done, it is not just in parking lot. The paving continues all the way up the southern side of the parcel. That's also covered.
40.
in the larger plan.
40. So I don't know of any other parking lots that haven't been reviewed for stormwater management.
Okay,
And stormwater management, the handbook is housed in the Wetland Protection Act.
okay. And DEP is busy methodically working their way through some adjustments to it, some updates to it. Okay, so that looks to be a sensitive area to be discussed further.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
On page 5, the diagrams from 2008 and 2011, can you get clarification on, is that the old road and they moved it closer to the property line? Because it's not in the 2011. So what is that light brown squiggly line as opposed to where it's not in 2011?
A scour line, it would be one guess. And the reason is because if someone had a path going down, it would be straight. Having it meander like that looks more like a water channel. But this is something that Goddard would be able to weigh in on. But it's a question of who's the expert at looking at aerial photographs? We'll get someone from the Department of Defense to come in and give us advice on it.
Well, that's my question is, if that's a scour line created by water.
Yeah.
And that's coming from the corner of the parking lot.
Well, it would look like it was draining a whole lot of the not just that small area, but a whole lot of water from what Peter has called the former barn area.
Right, which would, when the parking lot got flattened out, that would change that.
And this is part of Goddard's narrative that, okay, maybe they should have filed paperwork before putting in the retaining wall and done stormwater calculations, but the stormwater situation is a whole lot better now than it used to be. Is that a fair assessment? Okay. Any further question before we go on to the next?
there's only one.
Sorry, there's another.
Yes. We didn't want to
That
kill,
one down.
we didn't want to kill too many trees.
That was submitted by now.
That's the RDA that came in early last year.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So is there any question whether or not it's an agricultural use here?
We're getting to that. One of
Well,
the
I
issues.
think that's what the whole RDA is subject to,
Yeah.
whether that the commission feels it's in agricultural use or not. We don't need to be further than that until the commission,
Decide one way or the other.
yeah.
Okay, well, if there's.
Would be
interest-
my recommendation. at least.
Okay, well, if there's interest in that, I believe you prepared a
Yeah.
narrative of what commodities were being sold. And then
Mr. Chairman, if I may submit.
And then
So
we,
there's some pictures of agricultural, corn, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, sunflowers, squash, pumpkins between the years of 2016, 2019, that was sold at the Imperial Country Store out front. Those were grown on the property. Around 2020, we stopped for further improvements. And then recently, we just replanted the blueberries, as you all saw today.
Right, that's when Mr. Meehan purchased the property.
I believe it was 2015, 2016. Is that correct?
And before that, do we know what it was? Was it wild abandoned? Was it abandoned?
The purchased in 2012.
2012.
2012.
so do you have a record of any agricultural use, production of commodities between 12 and 16?
So 16, we're already selling them. So I could go back into records and see if we could find further pictures and stuff, but
Their farm plan,
what was that?
a farm plan that along with selling the produce.
I can find out.
One of the questions is, my understanding from talking to Leah and others is that if you are going to be a large producer of commodities, you file something with the USDA. And is that a fair statement?
If you want to take advantage of their programs, or if you
Yeah.
want to classify your land as 61A, yeah, you gotta,
Okay,
you should have a.
Mr.
Yep.
Chair, if I might, the question for the regulation is there a production of an agricultural product for commerce? And if there's a provision that says for at least 5 consecutive years to make sure that people don't abandon an agricultural use and continue to use the agricultural use exemption. We're in 2024. Since 2016, there has either been harvesting of vegetables or changing the field over to grow a different crop. But I don't see how anybody can seriously question whether since 2016, there's been an agricultural use of this property, which includes the time when these improvements occur. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but it was actively farmed from 2016 until the time the improvements were begun. When the improvements were completed, it's been put back into agricultural use. It's in agricultural use now, it has been since last year. The crops aren't being harvested yet because it takes 3 years to get from the beginning of that particular agricultural use to the harvesting. But it seems that whatever the controversies might be here, whether this is land and agricultural use isn't one of them.
okay.
Mr. Chair, I have no, yes, I don't think the argument is agricultural use. I guess my question is, at what point does agricultural use become a commercial with a parking lot? As soon as that comes in.
No, I think it's,
I don't know, is that not-
at what point does the agricultural use meet the standard set by the WPA to qualify for an exemption? And we have some interesting guidance from Mass DEP that I think you wanted to address in terms of the $500
I
level.
mean, the conservation agent and I have had a side conversation about
Okay.
this. We're both looking at the same regulation and reading it the same way.
Okay,
DEP seemed to be that there was some amount of, seemed to think, and I don't want to get too much into it because I don't know who at DEP,
right.
but to the extent that there's a suggestion that there's some threshold of profitability to constitute commerce, that's inconsistent with the face of the regulation as it's been applied for the, for
Okay,
the 40 years I've been doing this.
okay. So Isabella, do you confirm that?
So that I confirm whether I agree with the commodity or whether I agree that it meets the regulations, because that's the commission's determination.
When you look at the regulations,
I mean, the regulation says that land and agricultural means land within resource areas or buffer zones presently primarily used in producing or raising one or more of the following agricultural commodities for commercial purposes. And the definition of commercial is of pertaining to commerce and having profit as a chief aim. So I think having
I'm sorry, I
squash,
missed the last, I just.
As its chief aim.
having profit as a chief aim. So
Is that in the regulation of the reading?
it's in the definition of commercial from the farm handbook with the Wetlands Protection Act. But I think
Regulation.
having it in the country store is a demonstration of having profit. You're selling it.
And likewise, if the plan is to have a pick your own blueberry, that's definitely going for commercial.
Anybody?
Okay,
Right.
so regardless of what may have happened in 2014 or 13, before the applicant took it, I believe we can say that as of 2016, when the current owner took over, do we want to agree that this field was being used for agricultural use ever since then? I'm seeing some nods. Anybody wishes to think that it wasn't? Okay.
Can
So,
we ask the vice chair since, well, actually, can we ask a neighbor since they probably have firsthand knowledge of what was there?
no, well, when we finish going through this stuff, then I'll get input from the audience and abutters and stuff. This is,
But it doesn't exempt them from doing damage to the crop and stuff. If it's an agricultural use, you can't just, it doesn't mean, oh, it's agriculture, we can do whatever we want.
no,
You
but
still have to abide within those laws and
No,
have permits and
but
such.
what the Goddard narrative is saying is that Goddard is saying that over the past, since 2016, a number of changes have been made to the topography and physical surface. And their narrative is that every single one of those is covered under one of the 16 or 17 exemptions that are specified in the WPA. So if we were to say it's not agriculture, then they wouldn't be able to claim exemptions, and then they would definitely need to go and file an NOI and fill out their weight and paperwork. If we are agreeing that agricultural exemptions apply, then we go through on a case-by-case basis and say, okay, the pump house, does it qualify? Improving the drainage ditch, does that qualify? Other changes,
What is the field boundary? You know where they were before.
well, those are the things that we would then discuss, but as a rebuttal, they would be able to say exemption 6, exemption 12, or, for the pump house, they were improved, they were maintaining, repairing. For example, we went out there and we saw that some of the shingles are about to go. They do not need to file a permit request application to go out and fix the roof. That is considered maintenance. However, if they wanted to demolish the building and build a new one, that's an improvement, and that is not going to qualify for exemption. Does that meet with, okay, yep, your feedback.
It doesn't qualify for exception, but if there's normal maintenance of land and agricultural use, which is what our submission talks about. There's also normal improvement of land and agricultural use, which includes, for example, the construction of farm structures that don't exceed 4,000 square feet. So it's a different exemption, but there is also, I don't think we're talking about that here today, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, there is also an exemption for constructed buildings.
And is that allow you to go into a wetlands and put a building in there without a permit? Would be my question. Even if you're going on an existing foundation.
It's 1004.
Okay, well, I'll just agree that there's, this is something to
changing
discuss.
the footprint of as long as the footprint of the farm structure does not exceed 4,000 square feet and no filling the bordering land and subject to flooding or is beyond the footprint of the building.
Mhm.
Again, we don't think we're talking about that
Yep.
with respect to any of the work that's been done, but just
Doesn't
when you
that,
said you couldn't demolish a demolish a building.
No, I
doesn't that also go on to say that it's 4,000 square feet, no matter how many buildings you put on? So if you put on 10 400 square foot buildings, it's still considered 4,000 square feet?
I'll note, sorry, the exemption is for within the buffer zone for a structure within 4,000 feet, not within a bordering vegetated wetland.
Correct. Again, I don't think we're talking about that here today anyway. I'm just,
It may come up when we're discussing.
It may come up.
I apologize for veering off into demolishing buildings and whatnot. But one of the open questions is exactly what kind of work was done under a building permit.
we're ready to talk about that.
Yeah. Yep, okay, so we'll work our way through. Anything else before? We seem to have resolved the question of agricultural use, so are we ready to go on to the next item?
So we're in agreement.
I have not heard anyone saying that they wish to contest Goddard's stipulation,
Oh,
presentation that it was agricultural. Yes,
we're in agreement.
yes,
And it's been.
yes. So this means
That
that
issue,
is now, right, and so now we are able to have discussions about whether an agricultural exemption is applicable or not. Okay, let's see, I sort of lost track. Yes, we did. Question 7, on agricultural production in the ditch. Now we're going to question 8. This is the ditch primarily managing stormwater from the parking lot? The response was no. And the implication here is that the ditch is primarily managing stormwater from the blueberry field. However, this now, yep, go on.
That's not the implication.
Oh, okay,
As I said earlier, this is, there's a street, and then there's real estate, and then there's a parking lot, and then there's area downhill from the parking lot. So the applicant's position is that system is handling all of the stormwater on the property. And then out from the top of the hill to the bottom. So, but we didn't mean to say, we haven't done a calculation. I didn't want anyone to think that we've done a calculation
okay,
to determine what was attributable to the blueberry field or
okay,
the area of barn building or the areas that we haven't done that specific calculation.
okay. And this gets back to when the parking lot for 40 parking, with 40 parking spaces and 8 catch basins was put in place, there wasn't a stormwater management survey report. Okay. So it looks like that's a gap that we would want to address at some point in the process.
Mr. Chair, and I would strongly disagree with the sentence that begins, we do not believe there was an appreciable increase in the volume or rate.
Which one are you reading?
It's in GC 9.
We haven't got there yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm about to start discussing that question. We're just finishing up 8. Okay, any further questions? Okay, so I will now rewrite my brain.
Well, I guess I would disagree with the statement in 8. The ditch primarily manages stormwater. They say no. And I would suggest that if you analyze the amount of water coming into that ditch, I didn't go on. It starts off, you put what sort of pipe on it? It was like a 3-foot pipe at the bottom.
I think they just said that it's not just the parking lot, it's the entire property.
I think,
I
okay,
understand, but so someone's got to figure out how much comes from the parking lot, how much comes from the roof versus, and I would say that is the majority of it and overpowers what more might come laterally over the blueberry fields, but
okay. Let me make a statement and you tell me whether it's accurate or not. Instead of saying no, a more helpful response would have been, the ditch is managing stormwater from the entire parcel.
fair amount.
And we are not going to characterize whether it's primarily managing or secondarily. We haven't done the calculations and therefore it's managing the entire stormwater flow. Is that
They
an accurate
avoided the
statement?
question. The question was, is the ditch primarily? So someone's got to try to answer that. Answer the question.
I appreciate that there's a difference of opinion between Goddard and Mr. Hoffman, but we would suggest that the answer to this section 6 of the request and the answer that we haven't gone into yet to GC 9 are the answer.
Okay,
But I appreciate that there's a difference of opinion about that.
okay. Any further questions about the wording primarily or stormwater for the entire site going through the improved drainage ditch? If not, we'll move on to question 9. Question 9, the request for an NDA is described as, quote, improvement of an existing drainage ditch intermittent stream with bank along the southern border, end quote. Why was the location of that intermittent stream chosen as the location for the improved drainage ditch? It is also said the previously existing drainage ditch was relocated and functions for the same amount of water and size. Since the parking lot was expanded, wouldn't there now be more water discharged through the field? As I said earlier, the meandering stormwater that used in earlier years to go through the ditch, through the field, has now all been migrated down. I think a way of rephrasing this question is, now that the entire stormwater flow is going into the improved drainage ditch, wouldn't that mean you have to worry about the increased flow? And yes, you've armored the ditch with riprap and check dams, but there don't seem to be any calculations to say that channeling all the water of the parcel through the ditch instead of some of it going elsewhere is sufficient to protect the wetlands. So yes, you came back with an answer about what your narrative was, and I sort of like gently redirect to, we don't have a calculation. Would it be sensible to ask for one?
You're asking me if it would be sensible?
Well, it would go on the list of things that we want to do more investigation of, and this one would be to do a stormwater evaluation of not just the parking lot area with the 40 parking spaces and the catch basins, but also saying, now that you've changed the topography, you've introduced the 3-foot humps, swale, the humps that the blueberry bush is on, you're now channeling water differently on the lot. And we want to make sure that all of the stormwater going in at the end, at the bottom end of the improved drainage ditch isn't going to adversely impact the wetlands.
So if I understand it here correctly, it's a request for flow and velocity calculations.
Yeah, that's what we've seen in the past for 23 Cape Road and other developments where people have done major work or moderate amounts of work involving retaining walls and parking lots and
If find out, a way to measure water quality, of words, contaminants and stuff like that, that may be also flowing in that water down to the wetlands.
the problem is that any calculations they did now are going to be in the winter time. And they're not sanding and salting it as much as they would when they're doing it during Christmas, when they have a whole lot of people going. And if they do the testing in the summer, they wouldn't catch all of the salt and sand they'd be
Right.
putting on. So that's the sort of thing I'd ask a stormwater scientist to take into consideration in their report.
Mr.
Calculations
Chairman,
would be,
that's just, sorry.
calculations would be on size and rainfall, not
Okay.
actively measuring volume in a.
Would they also look at the impervious surface of the pavement and the roof runoff that Peter?
Roof is considered clean, but if
Okay.
it's a large area, then that'd be in the calculations, but.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Goddard did have engineering support in answering these questions, but frankly, I'm not sure it would be that heavy a lift to provide numerical values.
Okay,
I think that there are some of these statements that are made here are supported by
okay,
more specific. So that is the sort of condition reflecting back to the beginning of the hearing where we would be willing to provide a more numerical analysis of how water would be expected to perform, including when there's an interval between when it hits the roof
Mhm.
and when it hits the pipe, the catch basin system that Mr. Fayette described. And so we would be happy to provide a numerical analysis. of
okay.
that.
And we're also hindered by Mr. Goddard still in recovery.
You know, this wouldn't be his
Okay,
thing necessarily. We would get engineering support on that from Tetra Tech, which I think has been before me.
Yep. Okay, any other questions or comments on number 9? Okay, moving on to question 10, bordering vegetated wetlands. The offsite BVW delineated as A1, A13 follows the property line in the existing current fence. This is on the southern border. The green area that's listed is improved drainage ditch. There's some technical, there's language I won't read verbally talking about reference to engineering plans and other documentation that had available and we've been reviewing. The final sentence is that expansion of the field edge towards the BVW requires a conservation plan approved by the Concom and is not intended to convert BVW into cropland. And then there's a long citation of the appropriate exception for agricultural use. And then your response. And this one, I'm not going to try and summarize. When I was going through and taking notes, I wrote, I do not have the technical expertise. I'd have to rely on my agent or an independent consultant to come in and evaluate this one. So, Isabella, do you want to speak to your input as to their GC10 response?
Well, my question is hinting at the vegetation that may have been bordering vegetated wetland or buffer zone within the 25-foot was removed as the field edge was expanded, and expansion into a BVW is not allowed with an agricultural exemption. Expansion into a buffer zone may be exempt, does not necessarily exempt into our no disturb buffer zone of the Mendon bylaw. Whether, I understand that you don't want to use a mass DEP layer, and that you can't base anything off of vegetation that's no longer there. I don't know how much fill is under the ditch, so I don't know how deep of a soil core you'd have to go to look for wetland vegetation. It may give wetland wetland indicators in the soil because it's conveying water anyways. So, but again, as I said earlier, I've never seen a wetland that 100% follows a fence line, property line.
Okay, if you want to make a response.
A wetland scientist went out and delineated the
Yep.
wetlands. The DEP data layer is notoriously unreliable, which is why wetland scientists do delineation. And the best example of that, as Mr. Goddard pointed out in this report, is the wetland that this is bordering to isn't in that DEP data layer. So we don't need to have a conversation about the DEP data layer across the Commonwealth. If the DEP data layer was accurate, it would show the wetlands that this is bordering to, which it doesn't. So Mr. Goddard has gone through the bases of his opinion here. I don't think we have anything to add to it. If there are specific questions for him, since he's unable to talk, we could definitely add those to the list for follow-up.
So anybody else on the commission who has a better, can wrap their head about what this particular back and forth is about?
Just a couple questions. It sounds like, bring on the lawyers. Whether the bank of a water body that is not managed. So I'm hearing a couple things. I'm hearing from you before that it wasn't a managed thing, and so that was the problem because it was unmanaged. Well, then you can't get the exemption that a managed thing would give you. And so no cutting shall be placed within 25 feet of the bank of a water body that is not managed. So I'm of the opinion that's an intermittent stream and that it should have been given the cred. And so how can we fix that? Well, I don't know. So that's maybe not the question you asked, but to me, it goes right down to a major muddy brook. And was there water in it today? Are there wetland species in it? So it's a protectable resource up to where? Where it comes, the water meets the pipe that you put in, where does the wetland begin?
Okay, let's,
Sorry.
you ready for the response?
I would, the response is in the regulation that is in the question, MCA 10. What I had said earlier, to be clear, is that there have been no attempt to manage stormwater. That insufficient attempts to manage stormwater at different points in the past. I never said the ditch that appears in photos between, and we can find finally,
Probably goes back to 1938 as well. You keep going back.
I never said that the. So for example, the photo in 2013 for our ownership, which shows a
Ownership was 2012.
2012.
Yes.
I would just refer back to the photos, all of the photos that are in section 1. And we've clearly identified that there was something meeting the definition of a managed water body, which includes field ditches, cross ditches, grass waterways, irrigation systems, and farm ponds. So when we talk about managed water body in the context of the answer to GC 10, we're talking about managed water bodies as defined in the parenthetical in subsection 5 that's quoted in the question. So I guess to boil that down, there may be a difference of opinion as to whether what has been described as an intermittent stream was a drainage ditch before it was improved.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mr. Goddard's view is reflected.
Okay, so anyone other than Peter have any comments to make on this before we go back to Peter?
Does this also include what a managed field edge is and field boundary and how close that is to the resource area?
I mean, that there's a definition somewhere.
Well, no, I mean,
There's also
it's different than a boundary.
Part of the exempt activities is squaring off a field boundary, so that's.
A managed field edges do not exceed over 100 feet from the field itself. It's not the definition.
Part of it.
It says, field edge must be existing, even if it's surrounding the land that is already in production. If new land is put into production, the creation of that use of any field edge to support it would require the filing a notice of intent. So have those things changed?
I can't, I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, it's okay.
What section were you reading from?
This is the managed field edge. It's in this. I don't have the. It comes directly from the Department of Wetlands regulations there.
And it's my understanding that you cannot square off a field edge by filling in wetlands and taking other wetlands away.
We're not, just to be clear, no one on this side of the table is asserting that the field edges exemption applies to this, to what we're talking about. But the exemption that Goddard has identified that applies to this is B7, the cleaning, clearing, grading, repairing, dredging, and restoring of existing man-made or natural water management systems.
Okay, so this ties back to one of the unanswered questions. The southern edge of the parcel, whether that should be considered an intermittent stream and protected wetlands, or if that was only an agricultural ditch, in which case improving it is an allowable activity. Does that seem to be what the question is before us? And I think that's the one that we need to go and have further conversations about over the next 5 weeks.
Just to be clear, we don't see it as mutually exclusive intermittent stream.
Okay.
And natural water management system.
Okay, and this is where I'm saying, I don't know enough about I'm not deep enough into the details of the WPA to say when, I know what intermittent streams have different rules than perennial streams from just wetlands. So that's where I'm saying I don't have the background technical knowledge to understand how that argument would play forward.
And I'm guessing my question is not to do with that question. My question is more, are they allowed to farm so close to a resource area and change the field, move it closer to the resource area? 'Cause it's very close to the brook that's there.
Are you saying moving closer to the drainage ditch at the southern end where the
No.
fence is, or downhill?
I'm talking about downhill.
Oh, we haven't got to that yet.
That's
That's
what
one-
I also think moving the ditch closer to the southern wetland. Has
Yes.
occurred.
Yes, that was one of the questions, is the improvements that have been made since 2016 and whether that should have been permitted or whatnot. But this is all going to come down to, at the end of this, going through the details, we'll say, here's what the situation is now. What do we think is a viable end state? So that's something to keep in the back of your mind as we're going through all of these details about the small parts of the narrative. Okay, moving on to question 11. When we did a site visit in October, we noted cattails within the drainage ditch. Please elaborate on the edge. This is a continuation of what we just said about cattails are not dispositive. They do not prove the existence of a wetlands. Have a wetland scientist going out and do that. It's a disturbed area because it was a drainage ditch historically, and that's the whole can of worms that we want to talk about further. So are people comfortable with me skipping over question 11?
Because we're gonna get to that at another point.
Well, it's part of the conversation that we've agreed to have about nailing down whether
Intermittent streams.
it's an intermittent stream. It's a question is whether it is protected under the WPA or whether it was only ever a drainage ditch. And that's something that at a future meeting, we may end up having, if we cannot come to an agreement in the next 5 weeks, we may end up having a vote and then make a decision. And if they don't like our decision, they appeal. Okay, MCA 12. Now we're moving down to the bottom of the hill. It appears that the 100-foot riverfront, which is 100 because we've agreed there's an agricultural exemption. When it was cleared from 2016-17, vegetation has continued to be cleared up to the bank of Muddy Brook. We also discussed this on the sidewalk and pointed to areas. And what are the future plans for maintaining a vegetated buffer? And I believe at the time you said that the rows that had been planted were going to stay. You were going to let the rest of the area be filled in.
And that's an example of a condition that
We could put as part of a negative determination that area be, we put some sort of enforcement mechanism in to say that if you ever cleared that and planted more blueberries, we'd come back and with an enforcement.
and your determination is conditioned on that
Yeah.
undertaking.
Okay,
Could make them find bluebirds.
well, they'd have to be wild blueberries, not the nice rows and everything.
Then you have to. Well,
Works for me.
Okay, that's number 12. Number 13, it looks that sometime between 2016 to 17, Muddy Brook was lined with stone and large boulders. This is called armoring. And you were asked to elaborate, and the response, and it's getting late, so I'll summarize, was historically, it was armored by previous farmers to prevent erosion. You made a representation that if there weren't so much snow and ice, we could go down and say, this is a very old rock. This looks to be a rock that was put in 2016. Now we're back to a rock that's more than a century old. And so therefore, the narrative is that armoring is not an improvement. It's just maintenance of the fact that now that you're having a running farm, you want to keep up the existing erosion control that was done there. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, that is a fair summary.
Okay.
Just a question, I'm sorry I wasn't there, but armoring usually, the erosion is from the stream? Because it's usually, I would think that was from the cows going down the banks to, but I don't know. Would there be natural scour at that location?
And I think there are many scenarios where what historically was done is no longer of good practice.
The actual bottom of the stream doesn't have rocks. It is all along the edges, so that might be what you're saying to keep cows from digging their hooves into the sides.
Let them climb up. Yeah, I don't know.
A lot of granite down there too.
Okay. So it looks, one of the things that we can consider is whether we want to request more historical information. Maybe we could get testimony from abutters or old photos or something. It's just something to think about as their response to this particular item. Anything else about armoring the channel? Okay.
Nominated.
Yep.
Just, you know, do properly are interested in the opinion of the conservation agent.
Yep.
Mr. Goddard has offered his opinion. If the Conservation Commission determines that some number of the blocks that have been placed since 2016 should be removed, then we'd be amenable to removing them.
Okay.
That's, you have Mr. Goddard's opinion, but
Right.
if the preference is that the channel not be.
And his particular opinion is that getting something powerful enough to haul out a heavy rock, that would disturb the wetlands. It's now. Yes. Okay. All right. We've been holding off hearing from members of the public. Are there other items or issues that the commissioners want to bring up before we solicit that input? Yep.
How many blueberry bushes got planted? You know?
Believe it's over 1,000. But I'll double check. Get the back.
It's definitely commercial.
Every 6 feet, maybe 4 feet?
That's more for me in the road.
Mr. Chairman, the one thing that we haven't come back to that I just want to make sure that we've given you the information you've asked for is the rehabilitation of the structure over the system.
Oh, the pump house.
It
Yeah.
didn't come up in the answers
You're
to the
right.
questions, but Mr. Fayad has more information.
Okay.
Yeah, so the small structure contained a pump that's still in there. It was pre-existing our ownership. And then the second structure was reconstructed on the existing footprint.
Okay.
So the foundation is
Yeah.
original.
Okay.
And the wood that one of the members of the commission said is going to need to be repaired again was repaired. We can't explain why the building permit talks about new construction based on what we've discerned about what was done.
It was hard to see the foundation stuff, all this. Snow.
Right. Right. But in the building permit, there are hand-drawn blueprints showing that they would be pretty much building the framing as we saw in the interior of the building. And I guess the question would be, was there an existing structure at the time that was dilapidated, the roof caving in and needed work, or was it mostly the foundation with a few pieces of wood sticking up and you went and built something on top of it?
Okay, what we've learned is
Yeah.
Okay.
and that structure was that the roof was changed, but the structure occupies the same footprint on
Okay.
the same foundation as the structure that existed.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the second smaller building that we were wondering what it was, that's the pump?
Pump house.
It was historically prior to the applicant's ownership. I don't know how many decades prior, but it is a pump house that has never operated during.
Okay.
It's a historical relic.
Okay. So you're not using any?
No.
It doesn't have any doors or windows and it's just going to sit there because it's in the wetlands and nobody wants to do anything with it.
Well, again, we want to satisfy the commission. If the commission wanted us to explore removing it, we're going to explore removing it, but it's of no use to the applicant.
Oh, the historical district might want to have an opinion, a historical commission.
was the little one that's like this big behind the other.
What I mean is the bigger structure, you said that building was dilapidated and it was, what we see today was built over the same existing foundation, but how do we know what it looked like before?
We just have the aerial photographs and since we don't have degrees from the Department of Defense at looking at photographs, it's kind of hard to tell. We do see, and you can even go further back and look at some of the old pictures from the 40s and 50s that are high altitude. There's a little gray shape where there's a built there. You can tell there used to be something there, but not anything more than that.
We know there was no earthwork, no foundation work, that the carpentry materials were brought down over that bridge that some of us walked across and used to rebuild that structure.
Okay.
Are there any pictures that show two structures in that location? Because it's showing one here.
I don't think the small ones would show up on aerial.
No,
This
this
is like.
it's the small.
I don't think that would show.
But it's not even on these plans to me.
Oh.
Yeah, so that may be. It's sort of like, it would be exactly here where they stopped. They drew a line, it would be right there in the white area that they didn't fill in.
It's just.
All right,
So we might be able to provide, and we're looking at the area photographs we provided. And for purposes of illustration, the two structures have been colored in, say in the 2008 photo, but I'm sure we could remove that. I don't know what the resolution would be, but the areas that Goddard helpfully covered in as the well houses, we could remove that covering and we could see what's there. But if you look, for example, at the 2008 photo, you'll see that Goddard has highlighted the locations of the two buildings in 2008.
okay, so one of the questions I had reviewing the documentation is, when you went in and did the building permit work back then, how did you get the equipment in? And you're saying that you didn't have a truck driving up through the wetlands, instead people carried on their shoulders stuff across the bridge.
Because it was just carpentry. It wasn't construction.
Because you were just repairing and upgrading the existing walls and roof. Okay, so anything else from the commission before we go to members of the audience? Okay, anyone in here who wishes to address this after a long, detailed discussion? Okay, we'll go to Susan. Do you have any comments you wish to make after taking notes?
I think most of the stuff I had was addressed for now, but I might be able to come up with some comments, after looking at some more files and whatnot. The other thing that comes to the top of my head is, the length of time between, using it for agricultural purposes, in the farm handbook regulations, if anything met that and whatnot, and also the wetland on the southern border that was replaced by the ditch. Like, you guys, I believe, discussed that, but it's kind of hard to hear everything. So
one of the open items that we will be continuing to investigate over the next 5 weeks is, everyone seems to agree it used to be an intermittent stream, and everyone can now look at it and say it's a armored drainage ditch with check dams. The open question before us is, was the intermittent stream jurisdictional for the Concom, or was it just there used for agricultural purposes and therefore going and upgrading it would not require any permitting from the Concom? You and the other neighbors might be able to provide evidence or testify as to what you felt the condition to have been, and that would help guide the commission in to see whether we wanted to do further investigations that might involve core samples.
did you just say horses?
Or samples.
Oh, horse samples. Thank you.
What we have heard is that Mr. Goddard, as a wetland scientist, went out and flagged it and reviewed it and said that it was not jurisdictional. The question is whether we would want to investigate further, and one of the ways to do that would be to drill down underneath whatever fill there
Yep.
might be and take a sample underneath.
Right. Yeah, there's some building plans that show extensive wetlands on the southern border as well. I don't know if those are officially flagged or not. Is that part of the investigation still?
We have documents from 1999 that say that that's part of the conversation we'd have, and we have several different people and maybe town council getting involved to saying, okay, here's what the 1999 plan says. Here's what the building permits for the parking lot said. If you were able to provide any photographs out your backyard saying, here's what the vegetation looked like, those would all become part of that discussion. With the hope of coming up with a amicable understanding.
Can I ask her a question?
Yep.
Susan, do you remember what was behind there? Was it a stream? Was it a small stream that ran, down back to the wetlands?
On the southern side?
Where the fence is, where the new ditch that has been put in
You know,
is?
I don't. All I know is that there was wetland back there. We still have the patch on my side of the fence. That's all I know, but I could tell you that there was a perched aquifer underneath there because we encountered that when we built our house. There's a hard pan lodgement till about 5-8 feet down, and the rest of it is just loam. And most of it smelled like cow manure when we excavated it because it was like supposedly cows and whatnot were there. So, but I don't recall any sort of an intermittent or whatever you used stream.
Okay. For your
I hardly went
information,
back there anyway.
It's just-
It was
she's a
too much of a
geologist.
jungle.
That's why she knows all about the subsurface soils.
But it might not be a bad idea to delineate.
Okay, so one of the things that may happen is if we wish to explore further whether there's whether there was a jurisdictional wetlands in the past, we could examine the soils on your backyard which have not been disturbed and get a look at the hydrology there. So that's something we might want to reach out to you if the discussion goes in that direction.
It's a jungle, but sure.
So at this point, I think we've talked this to death, and I'll go back to the three things that I said at the beginning. We either agree with the narrative and find a negative determination with some conditions, perhaps. We ask for further review and more information and schedule a continuance until probably when council is back, the second meeting in February. Or we say, nope, by God, we've had enough. We're making a positive determination. We'll write up why we're doing that. And at that point, the applicant would decide whether to file an appeal or file an NOI.
I vote for Plan B.
So which one is that?
That is.
The middle one, that we need more
Right here,
information.
Peter.
Okay,
Peter right there.
Okay,
okay, so Peter, go ahead and make that as a, okay. So would you be open to a continuance until the second meeting in February?
As long as the second meeting in February is on the 20th and the 27th.
Which is the fourth.
we can make it out.
The fourth Thursday.
Or Thursday.
27.
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing for the RDA at 1:33 until February 27th.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay.
Have my paper.
My input is that the purpose of the continuance is to gather more information. I have written some notes up of information and questions that I had. A lot of them, about half of them have been answered. Over the next couple of days, Isabella's not working Friday, but we will see about preparing a document from both of us, maybe from town council, where we're specifically addressing those items that we feel would help clarify the situation and allow the commission to make a determination. So it's been moved and seconded. We'll take a roll call vote. We'll do that even though Susan isn't voting on this one.
Bye-bye.
Peter, I.
Leah, I.
Tim, I.
Mike, no.
Carl, yes. So motion passes. Thank you. And now we have things to work on. We have a homework assignment. Well, had more staff. So yes, I've been watching you back there with your head in your head in your hands. Going back to, this is agenda item number 6, notice of intent for 75 Blackstone Street, DEP 218-0863. Construction of a second driveway to service a home and associated grading occurring within the 100-foot zone of a BVW and within the 200-foot river brook. So introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Peter Lavoy. I work with D&L Design Group and I'm the engineer for the project. With me tonight is Fred Simmons, who's the homeowner at 75 Blackstone Street. We had a site walk, so I staked the driveway, the site. I did make some changes to the plan per our conversation at the site. The first thing, the shed was reduced in size and moved outside of the riverfront area. The second thing is I added notes to the plan that show the flow of the driveway. So it ensures that there's no runoff from the driveway going onto Blackstone Street. It all goes sheet flow across the driveway into the grass, or roughly 72 feet, and then it goes stone wall and then into the woods. And then I just added some additional notes on the plan, basically stating that none of the runoff shall go onto Blackstone Street. That the design engineer would do an as-built to verify the total disturbance within the riverfront, so the Mendon Conservation could clearly see that we still meet the required 10%. By moving the shed out of the riverfront area, the total disturbance did go down to 9.7%. And I added some grades on the driveway to ensure for the contractor the intent of grading of the driveway. That's basically it.
Okay. And at the completion of work, when you're asking for a certificate of compliance, we would be able to go out and determine that, and maybe take a watering can and make sure the water was going the right direction.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, any discussion from the commission?
Yeah.
Anyone other than Leah, because I know you're going to be bringing it up.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay,
Peter, what is the thick dotted line on the left hand, on the right hand side?
That's the erosion control.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, we had conversations about maybe filling in the wall so that it could never be used as the wall that has the opening now.
If you make that a special condition, I didn't want to put it on the plan just in case, some commission members didn't want the stone wall or us to go down closer to the stream or the wetland. So if you made that a special condition, about taking the stones where we're going to cut the curb opening and bring it down, that would be fine.
Right.
And we would show that on the as-built at the end.
Right.
And that way, even some of those rocks are large enough where you can leave spaces underneath, so that if there is any runoff, that corner seemed to be where the water would want to run from the street anyways.
Correct.
So you could leave openings underneath the wall to allow the water to pass through freely and therefore keep the conditions as they are.
Yeah, I think
by taking those rocks and moving them down, it's not gonna be a solid wall. There's gonna be a lot of voids in the stone wall, and the water will still be able to go through that. Yeah,
Right, I agree.
I agree.
And also, weren't we, mentioning something about monumentation? So that 10%, is always noted no matter who owns the property?
I talked to my client about that, and he does not want to put any monumentation along the 100-foot offset to the perennial stream.
Any particular reason why?
Every drawing I have of the property shows where it is. Someone going to do anything on that property needs to go through the building department. I would assume that they would know what these are and they would make sure it's enforced. And the Concom has the right to go on that property at any point in time.
The Concom is also reviewing all building permits. Okay, so, anyone else before, okay, Peter.
I'm sorry I wasn't on the sidewalk, but I drove by and it's a beautiful house and it sets up nice. I just have issues with, you wanted the driveway there in the first place and we said, no, put it on the other side. So you put it on the other side, but you built the house with the garage there anyways. And so now you come looking for a driveway to meet the garage that you built. So, what are proposed driveway? What's the details on driveway? 10 feet, 12 feet? What's it made out of?
It's pavement, and it's shown as a 12-foot driveway.
Because I thought we had requested some sort of impervious, maybe like a Hollywood or something, as opposed to just straight pavement. Any consideration as to impermeable bricks? Something?
Maintenance, he did not want to, he wanted a paved driveway for his cars.
How much, either through the chair or to the applicant, how much use is seen for this driveway? How much activity is it daily in and out of those garages?
Not daily, that's for sure. Weekly,
Weekly, once a week, a car going in and out,
there's 2 cars stored down there.
2 cars. I just have a hard time in such a tender buffer of a significant resource. This isn't just your normal run-of-the-mill wetland.
No, I understand, but just history-wise, there was an abutter who did an evaluation which has expired, but he showed it. He did it. He did the evaluation, and it came out to be an intermittent stream. So when we came for the builder, not for Fred, we came here for Lovisa. We were always given the opportunity to still look at the stream in this location if we had a chance to be an intermittent stream or perennial. Unfortunately, we missed it. We missed the time because we did have 4 pitches, but.
Oh, those the ones that were supposedly from August?
Correct,
September.
correct.
But they were, I can't remember.
No, they were in September. I thought the other engineer had taken the pitches in August, and I sent them to the agent, and then they were taken in September. And then when the September drought came out, it was after the fact that we had already took the pitches. We thought that it was not a drought, but then when the state officially put it on a drought, it's like a couple days late. And then when we viewed that, and we were within the drought. So we missed it. So it's still a perennial stream. But my thing is that there was a previous submittal that we used before that it showed as a intermittent stream. But the commission said that we could always come back and look at the stream because at that time we had, I guess the original riverfront analysis or had expired. I don't know. I know it is a riverfront, and it is the buffer zone is I don't know, I guess important, but the stream itself, we have documentation that it is dry, so we feel that if the stream was an intermittent stream, this would go away, and the only reason why we're here is because of the riverfront. Because we would be outside of the 100-foot buffer of the wetland. So, I mean,
And all the way outside. There is part of the driveway that's in.
Need the full 12 feet? I mean, I go up and down at our driveway, old Sawmill, it's only like 8 feet. Look the other way. And
I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem for you.
Yeah, my
So I'll make a motion to approve the notice of intent for 75 Blackstone Street, DEP number 218-0863, and issue an order of conditions as drafted by our agent.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Leah?
I would like a chance to talk. Because I have some concerns,
Okay,
since this was not something approved by DEP in the first place. For me to be comfortable with this, because I've seen sedimentation events in this stream that has flowing water over the year. I've never seen it not have flowing water. I'm not encouraged that you don't want to use permeable pavers. I'm not sure about the grading not going down to the street. I feel like where you move the driveway, if there is flow of water into the street, you have now created more of a problem because it's a longer slope, which is going to speed up the water and the sheeting of the water going down into the stream, which just goes very much down into the stream. I think there needs to be a deed restriction so that there are no more buildings built there. I think that boulders marking the buffer zone would be great. And I would like it stated that if a sedimentation event occurs, that it's the responsibility of the homeowner to clean that up and not just throw their hands up and say, well, you let us put a driveway here. And should the house be sold, that needs to be disclosed with that. That would make it more comfortable. I'm glad you came down from the 10%. Do we have any DEB comments on this new design? Do we have, somebody said there's a retaining wall. Are your do you have stormwater calculations? Have you built this to the 100-year storm level?
I don't have any stormwater calculations.
Stormwater doesn't apply.
It's applied to a single family house.
Okay, that's fine, but my other things still stand. I'm very worried about putting
But
a driveway.
the grading on the plan clearly shows that the driveway flows into the lot. Flow along Blackstone Street will remain. Any kind of runoff that runs down the gutter will remain and go down to the corner where the opening is, and that's where I can't control what's in the road. I can only control what's on my lot, and I can control the driveway. From the gutter of the road, you go up and then you come down. So that will maintain that flow along the gutter. No runoff from this driveway will get onto the driveway, will get onto the roadway. I clearly show it on the plan. I show spot shots. I show runoff flow arrows on the driveway. So anyone who takes this plan, any contractor will see, okay, they want it sloped this way. They have spot shots. And so that'll clearly show, the plan clearly shows that it's not going.
And if your plan fails and sedimentation goes down the street into the river, are you gonna pay to clean it up?
It is not going down the river. I can't do it by the highway commission. Look at their bylaws, I cannot have water coming into the street. It has to be designed to flow back into the line, just like the other driveway is.
Right, my question said, if this fails, and if this fails, and it's not constructed the way we'll check it, and there's a sedimentation event, are you gonna throw up your hands and say, the Conservation Commission said we could do this and not
You
clean
have
it?
the right to come in and inspect it when it's done and approve or request changes. If you approve it, it's done for the design and it will not flow into the street.
Okay, let me do something that I normally only do with Peter. We have a motion on the table that has been seconded, and I believe, Leah, what you want to do is offer an amendment to add certain special conditions to this in terms, and so I think you've mentioned permeable pavers, you've discussed maybe extending the retaining wall. The process would be we approve an order of conditions with special condition, with special conditions. They would go build it. They would generate an as-built. They'd request a certificate of compliance. We would go and inspect. At that time, if we are not satisfied with the sloping and the drainage, and we go out with the water hose and see, oh, your water's running the wrong way, they have to go and redo the landscaping. Once the COC is signed off, our way of dealing with it is if a concerned citizen driving by notices stormwater from his driveway going into the street, you contact the highway department and the conservation agent. We discuss issuing an enforcement order saying, keep your stormwater off the street. Keep your stormwater from adversely impacting the wetlands. This is the same process we're doing for 23 Cape Road, where we're saying, keep your stormwater from impacting it. It's a single homeowner, but it's the same process and the same enforcement mechanism. So if you can identify, you had a list that I saw earlier, if you can identify specific things you would like to have added to as special conditions, first we ask if the applicant is willing to agree to them. And if the applicant does, then Isabella records it. If the applicant does not, then you ask, we would have a vote on the commission to say, do we insist on having them in the special conditions? And then if he still doesn't like it, he appeals. So anything else, or do you want to start listing what you want specifically to change? Yep. Yes.
We have to vote on amending a motion that's on the floor.
Right. So what would happen is Leah would propose an amendment.
There's a motion on the floor, it's been seconded.
Yes.
So we either vote that motion or we make a motion to amend it, take a vote on the amendment.
On each
Yes,
amendment.
and that's what I'm now expecting. What I'm expecting will happen in terms of parliamentary process is Leah will identify one or more special conditions. Then we vote on that as an amendment. And that
You have to vote to amend,
yes.
then you add the amendment.
Mhm.
So, no.
Yes.
You have the motion and then you make amendments to the emotion.
No.
And then at the
I
end,
made
you
a motion. I made a motion.
Yes,
It's been seconded.
correct.
We either vote on that motion or we vote to make amendments. to that.
Yes, okay,
Right.
let me, I'm the parliamentarian here. So what will happen is Leah will make a statement along the lines of, I move to amend Mike's motion to add the following specific special condition. We then see if that particular thing has a second. If it does, we have a discussion. And then we have a vote. The vote is either yes or no. If the vote is yes, the motion is amendment. If not, we go on to lay a second proposed amendment. Then after the conclusion of any amendments, I read out the new motion as amended, and then we have a vote on all of that. Does that make clear parliamentary process for people? Okay, great. So
Okay,
Leah, your
Yeah.
motion is to amend by adding what?
my motion is to amend by adding a few things. One, deed restriction. So no more buildings.
Okay, why don't you give the entire list?
Okay.
Well, in the interest of speed,
There you
we'll do them all at once, and then if necessary, I'll split the question and we'll do them individually.
Okay, deed restriction. Put markers to mark the buffer zone. Make sure that the homeowner is aware that if there is stormwater runoff from his property, it causes a sedimentation event in the stream, that it is taken care of.
Yep,
One of my thank you for making it under 10%. That makes me feel better. That, and I would really feel better if they were permeable pavers. And it looks like you're grading it so that hopefully it's not going towards the street.
Okay, so if I can clarify your language and you can say whether this makes sense, you move to amend Mike's motion to 1, add a deed restriction, 2, require markers, 3, require permeable pavers. I'm going to make a ruling from the chair on your third point of making them aware that it is out of order because, as I discussed previously, it is always subject to an enforcement order. Okay, so my initial feedback is you are agreeable to the deed restriction and you are not agreeable to markers and permeable pavers.
I did
Okay.
not say that.
Oh, pardon?
I did not say that.
Oh, okay, so, sorry, I'm sorry for putting words in your mouth in the interest of speed. So do you need a clarification on what Leah means by having markers?
I think I'm aware of what that means.
Okay, and are you agreeable to accepting that as a condition?
I stated earlier why.
Okay, so yes, you're in opposition to that, and permeable pavers, you are in opposition to that as well?
Cost to do that is.
Yes. Okay.
extremely high.
All right, so we'll split the question. So we'll have the First Amendment. Leah,
He's against the deed restriction as well.
oh, you are?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yes.
Okay,
So for the same reason as putting the markers there.
okay. I'll speak again historically and refer to 23 Cape Road. One of the serious disagreements between public and the 23 Cape Road is the previous owner was expected to clean up a siltation event in the adjacent wetland. Because it was not a deed restriction, the new owners did not find out about it and were kind of surprised when we told them we expected them to clean up the previous owner's mess.
You would never put a citation into a deed restriction. The deed restriction is for the 10%
Oh,
being
okay.
maxed out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for clarifying that for me. Okay, so what is the
But I
purpose?
think if the commission wants special conditions, they can require that and put that in their permit. They don't necessarily need an agreement. So I would look for Leah's motion to be seconded.
Yeah, okay. So, all right, we'll do this the formal way. Is there a second to Leah's motion for all 3 points? Okay, motion fails for lack of a second. Sorry. We now return to the discussion of the original motion to approve, subject to the usual special conditions that
Mr. Chairman,
Isabella puts in. Yes?
I don't agree with the 3 points, but I do agree with at least 1.
Oh, okay. Well, then the appropriate thing to do is to split the question and say you want to split out the one you agree with. So which one is
So a
that?
new motion has to be made to do that.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we require a deed restriction, stating that the 10% has been achieved and that no further building can take place after this motion has been carried.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Discussion.
Can I say something?
Yes, we'll hear from the applicant.
So if you do a deed restriction and then if he say next year, he followed the stream and the stream was dry for 4 days. So then the 10% would not count.
I would put these requirement for a deed restriction into the special conditions.
Yeah.
So when the COC is submitted for, we would want recording of that. So say next year, the stream is dry and you get sufficient documentation.
Yeah.
And don't want
The
to
deed
move
restriction.
forward with the deed restriction,
Okay.
you would amend. Or
Because because technically he has 3 years, right? Because
it's 3 years.
an order of conditions is good for 3 years, so he could keep it open for 3 years to watch the stream. And if the stream did come, if it was dry for 4 days, he could come back and show.
You would submit paperwork to
Okay.
amend the notice of intent with
Yeah.
documentation stating it is now intermittent.
Okay,
And then we would have an updated site plan saying, nope, new line, 100 foot, not 200 foot.
okay,
And then that would change the certificate of compliance that we would generate.
okay. So he has three, okay.
I think that's a fair protection for us and an easy fix for you should the stream be proven to be intermittent.
Right. Okay.
Help me understand how the deed restriction helps, whereas to me, there's already things in place. As I say, the documentation that I have, that anybody else is gonna have on this, the fact that someone has to go through the building department to do anything in that area, and the fact that you have the right at any point in time to come onto the property to verify things, and enforce whatever.
Well, once the order of conditions or a certificate of compliance is completed, then that takes away our right.
And the concept of belts and suspenders. It's what's the negative? What's,
Once we submit the order of conditions, that's attached to the deed. So it means that if you attempted to convey it, the new owner, when they did a title search, would say, hey, Concom has outstanding paperwork. Once we sign off on the certificate of compliance, that is restricted. At that point, there is nothing in the registry of deeds to say that the new owner has to worry about a 10% limit.
But this plan is recorded at the registry of deeds, isn't it? The original one? Is that
Not the site plan though.
the original NOI?
Well, the notice of intent is, but not, there are no plans. You don't record the plans.
You don't record that
So it's not,
with the order.
Right. So like,
so the NOI is there, I mean,
right,
you're just gonna record it as
the only way it's gonna get caught is when, like, say someone wants to put a pool in and they go to the building department and say, I wanna put a pool in, then conservation would see it and then it would come up, oh, you're in the riverfront.
Right.
That's how it would come up.
Well, it has to go through the office.
Right.
Anyway.
Right, that's what I mean. She would see any shed or pool.
So what's the motion?
Just to put a deed restriction on, stating that the 10% has been met.
Or
So
9.7,
therefore, any future owner.
9.7.
He still has room to do something else. He could still do a shed because it's 3%.
He's doing it, should.
But it's outside.
It's outside.
Right.
But he could, you can't word it 10%, you gotta word.
Listen, I'm
It's
sorry.
3.3%.
We would adjust the final number when we got the as-built. That would be just determinative of what would go in the deed restriction. So it sounds like the applicant is, you're saying that you like the fact that you have 3 years to.
Correct, yeah, that's our
Yes.
safety.
Okay,
So the deed restriction wouldn't come into effect, because I feel that if we would have took the pictures a couple of days earlier,
Yep.
we would have been, we could
okay.
have classified this as an intermittent stream, and we wouldn't.
Now, what this vote would mean is that if at the end of 3 years, it's been wet all the time, there is something that we would be requiring to be put on the deed restriction
Correct.
before our certificate of compliance. Okay, great. So that's all clear. So any further discussion? Okay, we now, Susan's back, so we have a roll call vote. So the amendment that we are currently offering is to require a deed restriction that a certain percentage is very close to 10% is now in the 200-foot buffer zone. And that that would be the actual number will be determined when we get the as-built. So
Clarify what we're voting on?
we're voting on that we will add a deed restriction which says what percentage of allowable change has been made to the buffer zone, so that to ensure that a future homeowner would know that they're not supposed to exceed 10%. So there might be a deed restriction that says you've used up 9.7% out of the 10% allowable, or language to that effect.
I think you should just make it simple and say The deed restrictions is that no more disturb.
Okay, well, like, I'm not a lawyer, so.
That just makes it simple.
And Peter, this is all moot if.
Correct. No, I understand that. No, that's what I'm saying. Just make it simple. If this is a deed
Exactly.
restriction, there'd be no further, no further development of the
Okay.
riverfront. That's it.
I don't see the need for the deed restriction.
I do,
That's what I want,
I do, because
I want to clarify, I'm speaking. I want to clarify what we're voting on.
Yes,
To add that to the existing motion, correct?
the amendment
Then
would
we
be,
vote
yes.
on the motion.
and I want to clarify something.
Okay.
We've had too many instances. Conservation Commission.
Speak to the chair, please.
We've had too many instances on this Conservation Commission where the work that we have done has not been protected.
Yep,
And we
okay.
have not had any recourse to fix it.
Well, we chose
And
not
that's
to.
why.
In some cases, we chose not to do any recourse and now have a more activist person. Yes, Isabella.
I'll bring you back to the regulations. The performance standard that must be met within a 200-foot riverfront area is the issuing authority may allow the alteration of up to 5,000 square feet or 10% of the riverfront area within the lot. So that's the entire, within the riverfront area of the lot, on a lot prior to 1997 or after 1997, subject to the restrictions, provided that at a minimum of 100-foot wide area of undisturbed vegetation is provided. That 100-foot area is not provided, and the area is
So it's
lawn,
72 feet.
landscape. You're not gonna require 100-foot of vegetative buffer be planted. The purpose of a deed restriction would be to say, you are permitting 9.7%, and that's all you want to be done on the property moving forward. So that's the decision you're making. You're saying you're approving the plan with the shed as proposed and the driveway as proposed, and saying this lot is now at its maximum amount because it is not meeting the performance standard of 100-foot wide vegetated buffer.
Okay. Does that clarify it? Do you need more of an explanation? Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, we're ready for a roll call vote on the amendment. So,
Bye-bye.
Peter, I.
Yeah,
Like,
Sue, I.
Susan, I, chair votes yes, the amendment passes. We now have on the table a motion to.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to, since there wasn't any interest in impermeable driveway, I move that the driveway, since it only gets used intermittently, that it be reduced to 10, either is in something like bricks or impermeable paver, or reduce it to 10 feet
You mean in width?
in width.
I,
I'll just reduce it to 10 feet.
okay, so you're saying, what's
It
the,
was 12 feet to reduce it to 10.
okay, is that allowable for fire safety and building code and stuff, Tim?
For a second driveway?
I don't think, it's not a single family house, a fire truck, it's not a condition that a fire truck gets around the back or anything like that, so.
And how wide is a
That would
fire
be
truck?
something for the fire service.
How wide is a fire truck?
Well, the fire truck passes on a regular road, right?
It's it's no wider than 8 feet, right? And we're not worried about scratching the branches on the, that,
It's a foundation fire anyway.
I think usually a width is on a subdivision, 16 to 22 feet. Yeah. They don't regulate driveway. That would be in the driveway permit then.
Okay, so there doesn't,
It would
So-
be helpful for a wider driveway for emergency vehicles, sure.
but they have the wider driveway on the other side. So, okay, so the amendment is to have as a special, no, the amendment is to request that you revise the site plan to reduce the width of the driveway from 12 to 8. So,
to 10.
sorry, 10. So now I'll ask, is this something that the two of you are agreeable to, or would you like to talk about it further?
I mean, the standard is 12. No, the papers can be adjusted. I guess that's fine.
I appreciate that's 20% less impervious is in my mind. And it's just, it's not going to get that much use is what I'm hearing. So I have a hard enough time allowing it. But I'm seeing, no, this is your house and this is your hobby, right? It's your passion. So,
Okay,
so a little compromise. I appreciate that.
okay. I forget, did I get someone to second your motion?
A second.
Okay, so Leah would have seconded. So the second amendment we are now going to vote on is to reduce the width as stated. Roll call.
All discussion?
Oh, okay, sorry, further discussion. I thought we finished.
No,
that,
I
yeah.
just want to make a comment.
Yep,
So here we have a resident coming in, doing a whole plan, doing the right thing, meeting the regulation, and we're scrutinizing them. I don't get that.
He doesn't
We have
like-
other people come in, we drag in here that come with no permits. And here we are scrutinizing this one. This guy's doing the right thing, meeting all the regulation. I'm just want to make a comment, okay?
okay. If you want to follow up on that at this meeting or future meetings, that is something that the end of the meeting, good and welfare of the commission, you can make that kind of a more general statement.
I want to make it while we're talking.
Exactly. Okay, but I,
Okay.
yep. All right. Any further discussions? Okay, roll call vote.
Bye-bye.
Peter, I.
Leah, I.
Tim, no.
Mike, no.
Peter, I think that also.
Hold on, I'm still voting.
Susan,
Susan,
I. Susan, I.
chair abstains. Motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, so now we have a motion with two amendments. Does anybody wish to offer a further amendment?
I think
Okay.
that was a good.
Okay,
Thank
we now, I will now summarize the motion. The motion is to accept the order of conditions with two special conditions. The first one is to have a deed restriction as previously discussed in the amendment. The second one is to have the width of the driveway modified as previously discussed. Any discussion on this particular motion? Okay, roll call. Bob?
Bye-bye.
Peter, I.
Leah, I.
Tim.
Mike, I.
Susan?
Do I?
Chair, aye. Passes unanimously. Who knew this was going to be this contentious? All right. Now we're ready for the long-suffering 23 Cape Road. And we would move on to additional topics of discussion. 23 Cape Road, DEP 218-0831. Review site inspection report from January 18th by the town's peer reviewer, Deshang Wang. We have representatives from site management. I'm using site management to refer to the 5 or 6 different companies that you all have. Could you identify yourselves?
Sean Baggett, Vice President, Development Construction.
Tom's Moon, project manager with Arcos.
Okay. And we have a printout of your this is the LEC one. So my understanding is that we reviewed Deshang's report came out Saturday and then you responded to it. One of the things observations I'd make into the future is if you're able to give this to us a little sooner than the Wednesday before, you might not have to come in. For example, if there were things in here that are very contentious and you were strongly disagreeing with Deshang, we would want to reach out and have both you and him appearing at the same meeting rather than having to wait another 2 or 3 weeks. So yes, I understand he gave it Saturday, but it would be helpful if you could give us at least another day's notice so that we could review it and decide whether we had enough information. So having said that, I'll let you take it away.
Just the only thing I'd offer on that is Deshang has generated 2 reports. We have Dan Wells in the line, but the LEC report is actually in response to Deshang's first site visit. And then I believe the agenda item this for tonight is to review DeShang's second second visit, which I think it essentially states that everything that we talked about doing last time, all the corrective actions, all the improvements, created.
Okay, that's my confusion from having not had enough time to look at the
Yeah.
paperwork and discuss it with our agent.
So we just want to make sure we were here tonight. We thought the change report was a good bill of health. We're happy with the observations that he made. But we just wanted to be here tonight if there are any follow-up.
Thank you for doing that and following up. It's much appreciated.
No.
Okay, do you want to go through the points or just have the commission look through it now?
I read through some of this earlier today. It might be good to just defer to Isabella. How do you feel like this all shakes out? It looks okay to me.
Yeah, I think their responses were good. I think fishing is, responsible moving forward and it's not fair. And I think we're moving towards a better place with both parties.
I feel a lot better about this right now than I did a couple of weeks ago, and I wasn't happy.
Okay,
So,
I will chime in. If no one else does, I will come in with my comments. I tried to do that last as the chair. On your page 3 of 17.2 response, you make a statement, LEC did not observe any evidence that vegetation within the wetland was harmed or damaged by the thin sediment layer or slightly turbid water column observed after the 12/11 rain event. And I believe this is also repeated in other places. I'm saying, yes, it's great that you're making that representation. What I would be asking, and will communicate with DeShang, is to have him say whether he agrees, disagrees with your assertion there. And the reason is because I'm sure this is what members of the community will be interested in as well. And it all ties in with whether the sedimentation that people are observing is a result of the December event, or whether the December event just stirred up a whole lot of existing siltation and moved it downstream. And that is something that we will be carefully evaluating for the next 6 months. The other thing I noticed is I believe there was one where you disagreed with one of his recommendations. And oh yes, on the filter fabric at the bottom of some culvert thing. I believe this is page 6 of 17. Pred Engineering agrees the filter fabric is in proper working order for accomplishing the pre-treatment's goal of retaining future sediment. Therefore, a replacement is not warranted. This is another thing that I would want. If we had sufficient notice, I would have had Isabella fire off an email to DeShang saying, hey, they're disagreeing. You want to discuss that further? And if he strongly disagreed with you, then we'd have both of you in the same room and you would have the discussion. And that way the members of the commission would be able to hear the two experts arguing with each other, as well as being in the public record for members of the community. So this is another thing where we would specifically, I expect that DeShang, when he prepares his next report, will notice that you said you don't think you need to do it, and he'll put in his 2 cents.
He makes comment about it, it's associated to other portions of that same. So further investigation and mitigation action 2B.
Okay.
So so in that, just being responsible, he'll formally come back then.
Yep. Yeah. But this is the process I'm looking forward. If you agree with his representation, and then you don't really need to come in and say it, and prepare a report saying we did everything you told us to. And then DeShang 2 weeks later says, yep, they did it. Or he says, well, they didn't do it quite right and they have to modify it a bit. The goal here would be that you don't have to come in. We don't have to spend 15 minutes. You don't have to wait 2 hours before we end up hearing about this. So,
Chair, a
yes.
question. What's the color? The red is something that DeShang thinks is important, so he highlights it? Or,
What document are you looking
so
at?
I'm sorry, January 18th.
Okay.
Okay, so in that one, on the second page,
To be identifying what he will continue.
we're updated, because the first, in the turbine discharge at one point extended,
What page and what paragraph are you talking about?
page 2 in the first paragraph, in the second or third line, the eroding channel downstream of the tailwater pool was patched. The turbid water traveled about 200 feet to the Mill Plain Brook and stained leaves. The turbid discharge at one point extended over 50 feet wide. See the agent photos for reference. The site contractor needs to provide a report on the investigation of the cause of the turbid flow discharge into the subsurface trench and flow out during large. The entry points are the focus of further investigation. So who's to do this? I love DeShang. And I thought that he would do this, and he's saying he's doing his job. He's identifying further work needs to be doing. So I'm wanting to know who's gonna be doing that. And then so the site contractor, that's you guys,
Yes,
need to report. And then he does in red, the contractor should provide an update, well, on their investigation. Okay, so.
to that point specifically, Dan Wells, we do have an line with LEC Environmental, did include that in his response, in his report that just came out yesterday, the day before. That was that low line catch basin that didn't have the stone mortar completed for the December 11th event. That's since been patched up and that's base aggregate been placed all around. So that was the low line entry point where it's still got into the system. But that's since been.
So that's photo 1 on page 5 of 17.
That,
Okay, so my expectation would be the next report from DeShang, he will have seen your response to his first and second reports. And we would expect him to write whether he agrees with this solve the problem, and if he doesn't, he'll let us know.
Okay, and then again, it was that same letter. I just got worried about the sinkhole that was outside of your hay bales. And I know you filled it up and we hope that's going to solve it. But he noticed that was kind of small stuff and I'm worried it's just going to be until someone can tell me what's causing it. Any further information?
We considered bringing our machinery, how to put machinery down towards the wetlands. We just use smaller engine now. We can definitely replace that.
Yeah. But you might just, 6 months later, you got to keep filling it, right? I don't know how big a hole is or what is.
we did that with the least kind of impact to get down there, considering that's beyond our region control and kind of heading even further into the wetland area. So we kind of that would say more about.
Here's my proposal. If you believe that the situation warrants heavy machinery and really big rocks, you would make that pitch to DeShang. He would, if he says no, then you still want to do it, you can come and appeal to us. If he says yes, then the two of you come and say, we want to do something in the wetlands that normally we wouldn't allow. And then that would be available members of the public to comment, to participate and hear about that discussion as well.
So, yeah.
Mr. Chair, may I
Yep.
say something? Yeah, Dan Wells from LEC. So I think I'm hearing it's unfortunate that there just wasn't coordination. I didn't know DeShang was going back out on the 18th. So maybe through Isabella, we can coordinate our site visits better and our responses. So you're not getting stuff at the last minute and we're not wasting your valuable time talking about what we did, like you just mentioned. So maybe through Isabella, we can, DeShang and I can kind of work some of these things out between the two of us and take up less of your time. if that's acceptable.
Yes, you should be able to work with Gishang and get a regular cadence of like this particular Friday at this particular time. And if either of you aren't able to make it at that, the two of you coordinate and adjust the schedule. Isabella, are you typically participating in those joint site walks? Okay, so then you wouldn't need to get involved.
In our email chains, we need Dan and Deshane, so.
Okay,
I'll see there, I mean, if I want to come on the sidewalk,
okay,
but Deshane is, you asked Deshane to go after each main event, so those aren't.
those would be unscheduled, yes. Okay. Any further questions or comments on their report? If not, I would, oh, wait. Before I thank you for coming, I will say if there are members of the audience who wish to come up and ask questions or otherwise make comments or clarifications on the two reports. If these are on the public record, if you're interested, you can contact our agent and she would be able to provide the Shang's report, their responses, his responses, their responses as necessary.
I'm happy to donate mine too, because it weighs less paper. I just download them onto my computer.
Mr. Chair, I would like to focus, and I think they might appreciate the last page 3 of the April 18th. And maybe the historic washout impact to the wetlands and brook will be conducted per the request of the Mendon Conservation Committee.
Yep.
We have asked him for that. Is that going to be,
In,
do we tell him to go or he?
in the executive order, we put a specific date and that's what he's referring to.
Okay,
He's saying, yep, he's on,
he's on it.
ready to spring into action at that time.
Good, good.
And I'll note photos submitted by residents were sent to both your consultant and our consultant, so they are aware of areas that may have ran turbid in the rain event to follow up on. So they've been supplied with those.
Okay, anyone from the audience wish to come and comment? Okay. Let's see. So with that, I will say thank you for coming. And with luck, we'll be able to coordinate everything sufficiently that we just rely on the written reports and you don't have to come in and give a status update.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Agenda item number 9, 8 Sandra Circle, review activity that has occurred at the property and discuss with the owner. Do we have someone online or present for this? Okay, come on up. Isabella, can you give a background?
This is a property that an abutter has come in and complained, and submitted photos. I went out and visited in November, when I first heard of it, and I had a conversation with Shane at that time. There was some tree clearing and exposed soil. And Shane supplied me with an email from my Chesapeake's agent who said that tree work was allowed if there was no mapped DEP wetlands on the property. When we talked at that time, I hadn't seen, there's been some stone laid down in the temporary shed. From the time I went out there to the time with the phone, it was placed. There was miscommunication on my part. I would have maybe wanted commission to review the work at that time in November, but I thought it was just the trees allowing for parking. So whether the brick or the parking area and there's a stone wall and temporary structure, the property, I can pull up a plan, but there is a drainage ditch under Sandra Circle that was put in when the subdivision went in that divides this property in half. So I guess the commission maybe wants to talk about whether the work is within the feet of this drainage ditch and whether they want to see it submitted or not. I think the work is outside.
Okay.
Shane may have more to add, but I think you were gonna go out and measure
Yes.
as well.
Let me start by asking, could you summarize what the complaint was and when it was received?
The butter came in on last Wednesday and submitted these photos that have been uploaded. His complaint is that tree clearing, parking area, and temporary structure have gone in and may be within the 100 feet.
Okay,
Do we have a map or a parcel or?
okay, why don't you introduce yourself and your address and make a.
Yes, so my name is Shane McCory. Obviously, I am the owner of 8 Sanders Circle. I do obviously want to apologize to everybody here. That was never my intention. Obviously, when I first purchased the home in 2022, I emailed because there was an existing barn. I guess that's the only thing that's kind of left out is there's an existing barn. It's a 18 by 24. It was a 2-horse barn where the original owner, she kept a couple horses there. And there was a whole fenced in area, basically just going down the entire property line, going up from, I believe my neighbors would be 10 Sanders Circle. So there was a fence kind of coming along, going all the way down the road. And obviously I hope to kind of restore the barn. I don't know exactly what I'm gonna do with it. I'm really unfortunately have the time for livestock, but I'd like to kind of restore the barn. So that was my intention. I obviously did not live in the development at the time, but talking to the owner, his name is Joe, who was my neighbor, who I share the property line with, said a bunch of, the caterpillars came through the development. So I did obviously take down a few trees. I just took them down by myself. So they obviously weren't anything.
You're saying the trees just died because of the.
There was, if you guys can come onto the property, like I still have, but the bark's gone. Like I think the last big windstorm a couple months ago, a huge tree came down. It was mostly just kind of brush. There was a lot of thorns. There was a ton of poison ivy, like I had on my arm. I've kind of done very hands-on, so I've done pretty much all the work myself. I have had a friend who was helping, obviously, kind of spread the folders and stuff like that. When I see the photos, I can explain anything better. But basically, there's about, I would guess, 4 to 5 feet between my property and Joe's property. And my friend that came in, he kind of just helped me. There was boulders there. He just helped me kind of, obviously, because of the erosion going into the back of the barn. A lot. I wish I took a photo of that, but unfortunately, the whole back wall of the barn's rotted out just because of all the erosion that kind of came down. So he helped me kind of rebuild that and obviously stuff like that.
Okay,
So on the property where existing house and pre-existing farm in the back here, here's where parking has been and the area that's not gravel. The intermittent stream and drainage area come through and pass under the road here. So there's a culvert and a drainage easement in this area. They have to
So
plan.
in this picture, can you say what's in it?
Back in the.
And that's how far away from that work?
I measured it, so unfortunately with the snow and stuff like that, I didn't really tread deep into the woods, but I went from like the kind of, I would almost describe it as a bird's eye, like I walked like the property line along the road. I'm gonna tape measure where I believe that the culvert was, and I believe it was 85 feet from the first rock that holds the crushed stone in.
Yeah, and measuring roughly on the map.
As it's just hard to see the,
70.
it's hard to see the topo there. It looks relatively flat, but it looks raw enough that erosion could kind of get by. So thank you. I don't know what the solution is, right? Is to stop.
Look, I mean, the commission cannot say they want to do a site visit and make a determination at the next one. If they want to see since it is within 100 feet, but maybe outside of the 50, the commission could ask for an RDA if they want to see a permit. And I don't think Shane has any.
I just don't like seeing that raw dirt in this time of the year in that location. So I don't know. Time is of the essence, in my opinion. If that's the picture the way it looks now.
okay, Bob,
Mr. Chairman, on one of those pictures, it showed a crude stone wall on the side of, what was that, like a carport or something?
Yes, yep.
Was that there before you bought the property, or is that?
Some of it was, if I could, I do have a photo on my phone, I'd be happy to pass it along. It was there. has since been moved, and like I said, that's the whole reason why I didn't bring any boulders onto the property, you kind of just reworked them. And just tried to level out the areas. I do have obviously intentions to finish leveling it out. It's just the ground froze, and unfortunately I just didn't have the time to do it this year, because I do, like I said, I do pretty much 99% of everything on the house myself. So I do have intentions to obviously complete it, level it. I'd love to do grass or anything that you guys would recommend to, because the erosion was a concern for me prior to buying the house. Like, it was always like I could never walk to the barn. When I bought the house, like, I'd have to wear my work boots, and if it rained for a couple of days, it was not wet, but it was just a little wet. And so like the soil was kind of coming down. That's, like I said, I don't know if there's a photo of it, but my neighbor that's behind the barn, it's like a 4 or 5 foot, it just goes like straight up. I don't know when the development was made, if they, yeah.
Right around.
Yeah, so that's the drop off, right there. So like that was the whole intent of the wall, was to just obviously maintain that. And since then, it is tremendously better. Yeah, like I said, I do have intentions to kind of, which I talked to Elizabeth about, like I do apologize for the miscommunication, because when she called me on the 20th, the stone was already down. So I haven't really done anything since we kind of last spoke.
So the issue is that we're just worried about the ground
That's my issue
Okay.
from looking at those pictures. I don't know if we need to go for a site visit, but just I'd like to see it under control as soon as possible. Thank you. Well,
What would
there
you
should
like
be
me-
probably a notice of, I don't know, what's the
Can we
recommendation?
put some straw or some
I can,
wattles around it or something so that it
Yeah, I could,
stays in place?
I could put in I apologize, but I don't know what the name is, but like you put a stake every like 3 feet and have like a belt on it,
Yes.
to help with erosion. I don't know if he wants to do that. I mean, like I said, I apologize that I'm here. That was never my intention. I
Well-
thought I went through the.
You've had to sit through a lot of the meeting and watch me going like this and rake developers over the coals, so I want to avoid doing that here.
Yes.
So the first thing I want us to decide as a commission is we have a complaint. And the first thing we have to decide before we go giving him advice and asking about erosion is he jurisdictional for the Conservation Commission?
85 sounds like yes.
And so in that case, if there seems to be agreement that he's within 100-foot area, then we start working our way through the WPA paperwork and work with Isabella. She's recommended a request for negative.
Yeah.
NRDA, yeah, I'm out of letters, which is what you heard us talking about at 134 Cape Road, and yours would hopefully be a whole lot simpler. Once that process starts working, we can schedule a site walk and then go out, and that's the appropriate time for us to be making evaluations. Now, you are saying that you want to move quickly because it's a sensitive area, and I'll ask, what's the timetable that we might be able to do on that? If we can give you advice on saying, yeah, here's what to do to stabilize the situation until we are able to have a hearing and then have a big conversation once we've actually seen the site.
Well, I mean, if you want to see him lay down straw, or
Yep.
something as a temporary measure,
Yep.
and get a permit for the work within 100 feet.
Mhm. Okay, so
How much more disturbance are you going to create?
0.
So now you're all set with your footprint, now it's just stabilizing?
Yes, yeah. Yes, and like I said, I sent her the email, but I did reach out to you guys. And I thought based off the email, at least when I was reading it, like I said, I want to apologize that we're here, because I thought I went through the proper channels to obviously prevent this.
Right, for the tree cutting, yeah, but versus, yes, so it's.
Yeah, like I said, I just don't want to think you guys, I was trying to pull a fast one or anything. Like, I did reach out to you guys, or it was fine, and I don't think she's here anymore.
Because there's no.
what
Wetlands.
month was
It's
that?
December of 22.
Okay, that was when work called her in for 80-hour weeks and she wasn't able to dedicate a whole lot of attention to Concom business. So that's our responsibility as a bureaucratic organization, that we were not as responsive to you at the time as should have been. So Okay, so it sounds like you've had that request on hay bales. You can reach out with the agent for further advice on stabilization and whatnot. Any other discussion?
I just think whatever, if you're gonna do wattles, just make them biodegradable, no plastic or anything like that, but if you can get it covered up now, it's gonna be months, we're gonna thaw and freeze and thaw and freeze and so.
Yeah, do you have a reputation for stuff like that, or like would a Tractor Supply have anything like that?
You may be able to get them from Needs and Feeds.
Okay.
I
That's
thought
that's
they
really
may, I think
close.
they may carry that.
And you just want me to see it, just,
They don't carry straw, it feeds the needs, but you know what? Sometimes, believe it or not, Lowe's has bags of cut up straw.
okay.
And it's actually good because they heat it up and they kill all the seeds in it.
And you just want me just to kind of put it along the line,
I would just get
I
it
would
over
maybe just
everything.
spread
Yeah.
straw.
Spread straw on the raw dirt. And
okay,
then wherever water starts going from sheet into crevice, fill the cracks.
okay.
And then put a solid hay bale on there. I'm not quite sure what the site is, but yeah.
Yeah, so
Just
just,
once you go to seed, you can just do it over the straw and it'll.
yes, yeah, there's still a couple spots that are like low and stuff, so I'll, if that's obviously if I need to get permission and stuff like that. Just to try to level it out, but yes, I can do whatever you guys obviously need me to do.
I
Okay,
think
so
that would be the good thing to do right now.
Yeah, I'll definitely do the straw.
So there's not much else you can do.
So the expectation is you will work with our conservation agent and submit permitting. And we will review that at a future meeting. She can walk you through if the permit you're requesting requires legal notice and stuff like that. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have
Yep.
one more question. So the stone that I saw down now, is that all the stone that you plan on putting down? So
Yes.
anything beyond that point is going to be grass?
Grass or whatever, like I said, if you recommend something
Right.
else,
No,
I've even
that-
considered like wood chips, I don't know exactly what would be best for it.
If you just do a really standard grass clover mix,
Grass is best.
Okay,
clover's really good. But it's mixed with a little grass is always good too. So just so that it stabilizes, unless you want to mulch it and do a garden there.
Could be spreading that for
Okay, anything further? All right. We finished the Conservation Commission section, but I'm going to channel my inner Micah Mandalia and give you some advice about small town stuff. You've annoyed one of your neighbors enough that they took a whole lot of pictures over multiple days of your property. So my first recommendation is you see if you can reach out to them and come to an agreement with them on what they're agreed. If they are still angry at you, from looking at the pictures, it looks like you have some business related equipment and stuff so then they've complained to the Concom. If they are not happy with you and you aren't able to mend fences with them, they may go and try and say you are conducting a business on your property and that's in violation of the zoning, and then you'd have to go before the zoning board and explain to them why you aren't running a business.
Mhm.
So you're a whole lot better off if you can avoid all of those complications and establish good relationships
Yeah,
with your neighbors.
regarding the trailers and stuff like that, like there's, I think they might have taken a picture of the dump trailer, like that's not on the property all that much. I renovate the inside of the home.
Oh, I understand. but-
Yeah, so, and then as far as the neighbor goes, they loved me when they first moved in. And then he had a very unpleasant conversation in front of me and my girlfriend at the time, and he was pretty rude. But again, like, I know who's complaining, and I mean, it's just very unfortunate. He has 2 boats in his backyard, an enclosed trailer, 2-car garage, like.
Yep.
It's just, I unfortunately don't know why he flipped a switch.
Okay, well, as I said,
to him, but
make sure that you understand what the zoning bylaws allow you to store on your property that happen to be commercial vehicles, and make sure that you are staying within the letter. You can reach out to the people ahead of time, and that way, if there is another complaint made on that basis, they would say, oh yeah, we've already talked to the guy, we've communicated with them, and that way they don't haul you in front of another zoning board meeting and it becomes a much bigger deal.
okay, so who should I reach out to find that information?
The people in town hall would be planning board, zoning board,
Would be the building inspector.
building inspector, yeah,
So Erickson?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Erickson.
okay.
You know, there's no, this board is not concerned with vehicles being parked.
Right, that's why I said I'm done with the conservation part, now talking small town advice part.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Wolfdale, my parents bought in 92 down there, so it's a very small town as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that completes action on agenda item 8.
Thank you for coming in.
Yay.
Thank you.
I'll
So,
send you an email tomorrow.
so basically, I just fill out the permit, and then do I have to come back here after?
She'll walk you through the long and involved process and you'll be writing a couple checks to a couple different places.
Okay.
Yeah. An RTA is $25 locally and the paper costs $150, so that's the bulk.
They're not big checks.
Yeah.
If we get that in next week, we can have you on for the February 13th.
23rd.
So, or, yeah, so we have a week if you want to get it in for that first meeting of February.
Yeah, I should be able to take care of it. They said you were off tomorrow, so would I see it Monday or?
Tomorrow. I might be able to get it out. Take tomorrow.
You're off tomorrow. Monday.
She's a workaholic. Okay, thank you for coming. We'll move on to agenda item number 10, updates. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're all done.
Run.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Well, you can.
I do have a short chair update. Last night, the General Bylaw Review Committee met online. Isabella attended, and one of the topics of discussion was proposed updates to the Mendon Wetlands Protection Bylaw. The discussion that we had is that Isabella will be, in her copious free time, examining the existing bylaws and preparing red lines of things that she wishes to delete or change. And at the same time, she will see whether sections of the bylaws should be removed as bylaws and instead turned into regulations that we as a commission adopt. This is something that we've been talking about on and off for a couple of years. And as I said, it's something that we may do as part of it. The way the process would work is Isabella would prepare her red line documentation along with regulations. She comes to the commission. We say, okay, we think those bylaw changes are a good idea. Yes, we will vote to accept these regulations. Then I take off my Concom hat and put on my GBRC vice chair hat, and she comes to the GBRC and we schedule it for a future town meeting to say we're going to change the wetlands bylaw. And oh, by the way, you don't have to worry about these large sections we're removing. They've been turned into regulations. And
What's the difference between a bylaw and a regulation?
bylaws must be passed at town meeting. Regulations are adopted by us. It's a lot easier to change a regulation.
But the bylaw establishes your authority to adopt regulations. So you could have, your bylaw could be cut all the way to the Conservation Commission can adopt regulations. That's pretty much what the Wetland Protection Act does. The Wetland Protection Act says, here are the interests of the Wetland Protection Act and the wetland resources. Then the regulations are 500 pages long. You know, so the performance standards and those things go with regulations. Typically a bylaw will include more than just see the regulations because you don't want things that a board can change on the fly. You want something, so things like ticketing and enforcement abilities and the 25 no disturb, 50-foot no build would stay in the bylaw.
Okay.
And then you'd have like performance standards for the 25 no build in a regulation. Because regulations might change with new science or new, you know.
Okay, and you're trying to avoid going to town meeting to change procedural operations.
Yeah, so like the bylaw requires 7 physical copies. That can be cut out of the bylaw because this board wants 2 physical copies. And that can be of the regulation that the commission can change with time. And the fees are in the regulations, so the commission can increase fees over time without going to town meeting.
One of the things the GBRC is doing overall is, in 1961, a $50 limit was set. Yeah, it's time to raise that to 500. And if it were not in the bylaws, if it were in a regulation for that department, it would have been done already.
Mhm.
All right, so that concludes my chair update. Conservation agent.
I've submitted the annual report and the budget. I forwarded the annual report to the commission. I think if there were any large changes that people wanted, I could submit those, but the deadline was last week. So those are both submitted. And then I've also submitted a compensation study. The select board hired the Collins Center to evaluate all positions and departments' pay grades. So that's ongoing. And then I've been working on a Mass Trails grant application for the Maple Farm and Muddy Brick North areas. And then for 42 Millville, the expired order with wetland replication that hasn't been completed. Margaret Bacon is the wetland scientist on there. She said that they got out there to do the surveying and site evaluation this month, and should expect submittal February or March. I think the commission had said they wanted to see it in January, so that's a delay.
Is that the house where there was town land?
No,
No.
42 is the one that had wetland.
The
work.
driveway,
They,
wetland.
they're,
When he stopped for a while and then he did.
and
he did something.
their order of conditions expired.
Got you. Okay, I remember that one now.
And then my only note on procedures would be that I know you like to do number of consultants, but typically it's old business, new business, and the timeline that permits were submitted for. So a new public hearing being heard prior to an already open continued hearing. I would just maybe have the board consider that moving
Okay.
forward.
Okay. We can discuss procedures when it isn't 10 o'clock. So maybe we have that at a future meeting during the welfare part. Land use?
Did you meet?
We did have a meeting and it was mostly about other stuff, but nothing comes to mind. Because well, energy, there's, are we going to combine that to, because now that committee is looking at energy, which isn't really land use, but so nothing that we need to discuss.
Okay. 61A withdrawal. Last we heard 2 weeks ago, department heads were hobnobbing amongst themselves. Any further activity that would be interested in? Okay, so they're still considering it. The clock is ticking, so we'll ask again in 3 weeks. All right. That concludes that. Then we would have good and welfare for the committee. If anyone else wants to say anything this late and keep us here. Otherwise, we will move to minute approval. Chapter number 10, I will entertain a motion to review and approve all three at once.
I will make a motion to approve and review all three at once.
Second.
Any discussion? I read them. They
I
looked
did too.
okay.
They looked okay.
I read them too.
I know.
Okay. Roll call vote.
Bye-bye.
Peter, I.
Yeah.
Am I?
Okay.
Susan, I.
Chair votes aye, passes unanimously. Woohoo. Okay, no items not anticipated because we discussed them. And I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn, please.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in, roll call.
You don't
Bye-bye.
take mine?
Peter, I.
Yeah.
Sue, I.